Chapter 248. The Cultivation Planet, Crystal. The evil-looking young man looked at Wang Lin and slowly said, "Divine retribution. I can believe that a waste of a planet like this could have such a magical treasure." Wang Lin stared at the person. Only after that person looked at the divine retribution and revealed a look of fear did he relax a bit. If the youth was indifferent toward the divine retribution, then the only thing he could do hide was inside the heaven-defying bead-s space, and that was not a good idea. The evil-looking young man was also feeling very frustrated. He never thought that he would meet the power of divine retribution here. If he was at full power, it would not a big deal. He would be confident that he could destroy this sliver of divine retribution. But right now he had only recovered 30% of his strength. He was merely an early-stage soul transformation level cultivator. As a result, although he could defend against the divine retribution, he would certainly be injured. If his cultivation falls below soul transformation, he won't be able to leave and will have to find another place to heal up again. All of this worrying was because the minimum cultivation level required to use the star disk was soul transformation. However, these are not the main reasons. The main reason was that inside the transfer array, he felt a power that made his skin crawl. This was a power he was very familiar with. The evil-looking young man let out a snort. He no longer looked at the divine retribution and looked toward Wang Lin. "Junior, hand over the bag of holding and I'll let this matter go," he said. "Is this what Senior wants?" Wang Lin's gaze was serious as he stared at the person and took out a bag of holding. The evil-looking young man's gaze quickly shifted to the bag and he said, "That is correct." "Toss it over here." Wang Lin hesitated a bit. The youth was simply too fast. Even if he were to ask him to go far away or to wait until he himself was far away, it would all be pointless. If this person really wanted to kill him, it would be very easy. After pondering for a bit, Wang Lin decisively threw out the bag of holding. The evil-looking young man caught the bag of holding. After scanning it with his divine sense, his expression softened. He looked at Wang Lin. His face showed no expression, neither anger nor happiness. Wang Lin stared at the young man. He placed the divine retribution lightning before him and said, "Senior, Junior has already returned the bag of holding, so I'll take my leave." With that, he carefully backed up. The evil-looking young man looked at Wang Lin. His eyes suddenly started glowing. Two beams of colorful light suddenly shot out from his eyes toward Wang Lin at an unimaginable speed. Wang Lin had remained cautious this whole time, so when he saw that the youth acted, his G realm shot out without any hesitation and collided with the colorful light. Shortly after, Wang Lin coughed out a mouthful of blood as the red lightning formed by the G realm collapsed under the colorful light. While Wang Lin retreated, he took out the restriction flag. The last restriction appeared in his hand and was about to land on the restriction flag. The evil-looking young man's expression changed greatly and he shouted, "Stop! Little friend, don't be rash." With that, he backed up and stared at the restriction flag with fear. He bitterly smiled. A sliver of divine retribution would only lower his cultivation level, not kill him. At most, it would force him to go into closed-door cultivation for a few thousand years. But after he saw the restriction flag, he understood why this junior would have a sliver of divine retribution. Although he didn't know what the restriction flag was, he could immediately tell that it was a magic treasure that could bring out divine retribution. He had a few of those weapons himself, so he knew of its power. If he let his kid continue, then he would not come out of it with something as simple as needing to take more time to recover. He might forever lose the chance to recover his cultivation. Wang Lin still had some blood at the corner of his mouth as he looked at the evil-looking young man. Right now, with just one thought, the last restriction would land on the restriction flag. If he gave up the flag and then used the sliver of divine retribution as a guide, he was confident that he could direct part of the divine retribution-s power onto the evil-looking young man. Wang Lin stared at the young man and said, "I have already returned the bag of holding and didn't touch it at all." Why did Senior go back on his word? The evil-looking young man pondered for a while, then asked, "Was the red lightning you just used the G realm?" His tone was uncertain. Wang Lin's expression remained normal, but his heart was in turmoil as he silently stared at the young man. The evil-looking youth stared at Wang Lin and said, "I should be correct. What you used just now was the G realm." Right now, the youth's feelings were very complicated. Wang Lin had brought him one surprise after another. At this almost waste of a planet, Not only did this kid have a sliver of divine retribution and a magic treasure to call the divine retribution, but he also had the Ji realm. It was this Ji realm that caused his killing intent to completely disappear. The evil-looking young man took a deep breath and revealed a strange expression. Wang Lin's expression remained calm. After a moment of silence, he said, "If Senior doesn't have anything else, then Junior will take his leave." With that, he carefully backed up. If the youth were to move at all, he would activate the divine retribution without any hesitation. The evil-looking young man hesitated for a while and asked, "Do you not want your Ji realm to break through the bottleneck?" Wang Lin's body stopped moving, and he stared at the youth. The evil-looking young man hesitated once more. He sighed and said, "Forget it. Kid, you better listen. The Ji realm is a very extreme power. Breaking through the bottleneck is very difficult, but it's not impossible." Wang Lin's expression remained unimpressed as he silently looked at the person. The evil-looking young man revealed a look of appreciation, and his eyes suddenly lit up as colorful light slowly appeared. The light turned into a ball of light and floated in his hand. Wang Lin's caution reached its extreme as he stared at the colorful light. The evil-looking young man looked at the colorful light with a complex expression. After a long time, he sighed and said, "Check the light with your divine sense." Wang Lin pondered for a little before scanning the light with his divine sense. His expression immediately became strange. He paused, then asked, "This is inside the colorful light." He detected a sliver of Ji realm. This discovery shook his heart. The evil-looking young man took a deep breath and slowly said, "You found it. This colorful light on my home planet is called the five-colored Ji realm. This was originally not mine. It was gifted to me by a friend as he was dying." Wang Lin took a deep breath. His eyes trembled as he looked at the colorful light. The evil-looking young man waved his hand and the colorful light disappeared. He looked at Wang Lin and said, "The Ji realm is divided into many different kinds. As for how many there are, no one really knows. Cultivators with Ji realm are rare in the cultivation union, so I am unable to see what property your Ji realm contains. But I know that no matter what type of Ji realm it is, they all have a bottleneck, and those bottlenecks are extremely difficult to break through. I know of a method that allows the Ji realm to break through the bottleneck, the cultivation planet crystal. This crystal is given to every rank cultivation country when it gets approved by the cultivation union. The old monsters of the cultivation union use their heaven-defying powers to form the crystal. It is a rank 6 cultivation country's national treasure. If a Ji realm cultivator obtains it and refines it, there is a chance of breaking through that Ji realm bottleneck. Wang Lin's expression was kind of ugly. A rank 6 cultivation country's national treasure was not something he could obtain. The evil-looking young man looked at Wang Lin. He then slapped his bag of holding and took out a black disc. He casually hit the disc with his right hand, and the disc suddenly grew larger while releasing a gentle light. If you manage to obtain the cultivation planet crystal, and obtain the qualification to leave this waste of a planet, you can come and find me at the 5 Elements planet. My name is Na Duo. With that, he rose up in the air and disappeared into the flying disc. Shortly after, the disc began to spin rapidly, causing a hole to appear in the sky. Through the hole, Wang Lin could see the endless void filled with bright stars. The disc moved and entered the hole. The hole rapidly shrunk and disappeared without a trace. Wang Lin considered himself very lucky that this person didn't pursue the matter about the bag of holding. Whether it was the restriction flag or the sliver of divine retribution, both were his ultimate weapons, especially the sliver of divine retribution. These were things that he didn't want to use if he didn't have to. He looked at where the hole disappeared and a powerful urge appeared in his heart. When he was young, he dreamed of flying in the sky, but now he wished to fly among the stars. He took a deep breath and turned around to leave. The cultivation country crystal of a rank 6 cultivation country was not something he could obtain at the moment. Whether what the evil-looking young man said was true or not, it was still a clue. If he ever reaches a cultivation level high enough to obtain it, then he wouldn't mind trying it out. The only thing he needed to worry about now was how to reach the spirit-severing stage. Producing a spirit-severing cultivator is the requirement for a rank cultivation country to reach rank 4. It is very difficult. It has to be said that on the entire planet, there are countless rank 3 cultivation countries, but less than 20 rank 4 cultivation countries. This data clearly displays the difficulty of reaching the spirit-severing stage. If he wants to reach the spirit-severing stage, the spiritual energy and environment of a rank cultivation country isn't T enough. Wang Lin's goal is to find a rank cultivation country and reach the spirit-severing stage there. He took out the map. After looking at it for a while, he set his sights on the 5-sex union. This rank 4 cultivation country was the closest one to his current location. Half a month later, the border of the 5-sect union appeared before Wang Lin. At the border, there was a light screen blocking the path. This was the difference between a rank 3 and rank 4 cultivation country. This light blocked outsiders from entering. Wang Lin arrived before the light screen. After looking at it for a bit, he sent out a restriction. The restriction landed on the light screen, and an opening appeared. Without a word, Wang Lin went inside. Brothers, have you not yet hit the like button for the VIDEO? Wish that the like button for the VIDEO would be hit. Chapter Cultivation. After gathering a lot of spring water from the mountain, Wang Lin began to make spiritual energy-filled spring water. When it was 10 at night, he locked his door. As a precaution, he tied one end of a rope to the door and the other end to his arm so he would know right away if someone opened it. After drinking few large gulps of spring water, he felt his body heat up. He then stared at the bead to enter the dream. In the endless dream space, Wang Lin sat cross-legged as he started to cultivate. When he was cultivating, the lights all around him became more gentle. Wang Lin wasn't aware of this, but the lights entered his body. After staying there for a day, all the spiritual energy from the water was gone. But this time he could clearly feel the difference in his body. Before, when he would finish Sun Daju's medication, he felt heat. However, in the most critical moment, all the spiritual energy would scatter. But this time was different. Even though they still scattered, there was still a sliver left in his body. Although it was not a lot, Wang Lin gained a lot of confidence from those results. After considering it for a while, he couldn't figure out why it was different. So, in the end, he could only speculate that it was because of the mysterious stone bead. Because he couldn't leave the dream of his own will to get more spring water, he could only continue to cultivate for a long time. In the end, he realized that there was a difference between the dream space outside. Even though he had been cultivating for more than a month, he would feel refreshed and very comfortable after cultivation. But here, after the spiritual energy from the spring water had all dissipated, he didn't have the refreshed and comfortable feeling. Instead, when he kept cultivating, he felt short of breath. After hesitating for a while, Wang Lin guessed that it was related to the existence of spiritual energy. There was no natural spiritual energy in the dream space. The more he thought, the more he felt he was correct. He frowned, thinking, if there was only a way to bring in the spring water from outside, it would be all good. Thinking about it, his heart suddenly skipped a beat as he looked at his own body and revealed a puzzled expression. Wang Lin was very puzzled by the red disciple uniform he had on. He quickly checked the pocket where his bag of holding was and found that it missing. Clothes can appear in the dream space, but the bag of holding couldn't appear. He bitterly thought about it and decided to experiment on what items could or couldn't be brought into the dream space once he leaves. Time passed by quickly. After 50 hours had passed, the feeling of being torn apart appeared and woke Wang Lin up. He still had a question in his heart. Why could he only stay in the dream for 5 hours? With that question in mind, he filled a gourd with spring water and carried it on his shoulder, ready to enter the dream again. But this time, no matter how he stared at the bead, he didn't feel the usual drowsiness. Wang Lin was frightened. After thinking for a long time, he contained the fear in his heart and sat down to cultivate. Gradually, as his breathing steadied, the natural spiritual energy was absorbed by his body. As it dissipated, some remained in this body. However, this was still far from the first layer of QI condensation. He spent the whole day cultivating. He kept drinking the spring water to keep his body filled with spiritual energy. In addition, he always held the stone bead, hoping to enter the dream space again, but failed to do so every time. Night came. He opened both his eyes and could feel that the spiritual energy in his body had increased by a little. If it was normal, he would be very excited, but he was restless. He looked at the bead again and suddenly felt drowsy. Wang Lin revealed a happy expression as he looked away to expel the drowsiness. He stood up and rubbed his chin while pacing around the room, pondering over what had happened before and after he entered the dream. He finally found the problem. The first 2 times, He entered with almost no time in between. The third time was 5 hours after the second, and the fourth time was a whole day after the third. Following this logic, there were some restrictions on entering this dream space. To be safe, one should wait 5 hours after a use to guarantee entrance. After resolving that issue, Wang Lin began to prepare to test what he could bring into the dream space. He ended up gathering a lot of things, including 3 gourds. One was a gourd with some remaining dew, one was empty, and one was filled with spring water. He even put a piece of the broken stone bowl into his pocket. In addition, he took out a sweet potato and a cloth from his bag of holding and bound them to his body before entering the dream again. In the dream space, Wang Lin quickly checked his body. The sweet potato, broken stone bowl, and cloth were all there, but the 3 gourds and his bag of holding weren't. He concluded that, without a doubt, there was no spiritual energy within this dream realm, so any normal item, in other words, any item without any spiritual energy, could be brought in. The 3 gourds and the bag of holding all contained some spiritual energy, therefore, they couldn't be brought in. Letting out a sigh, Wang Lin began to think bitterly. He couldn't bring the gourd in there. And the few gulps he took from the gourd before going into the dream space weren't enough to last him the full duration of his stay. After thinking about this, an idea flashed through his mind. He felt like he had an idea, but couldn't grasp it. The feeling of an idea just outside of his reach made him go deep into his thoughts, organizing his ideas one by one. After a long time, his expression turned happy as he grasped one key point. The spiritual energy-filled water couldn't be brought in, but the spiritual energy that entered his body didn't disappear. It was that you couldn't bring objects with spiritual energy in there, but if he thought carefully, he might find a way. After 50 hours had passed, he quickly left his room and searched the mountain until he found a few wild gourds and took them home. He believed that the 3 gourds from earlier couldn't be brought into the dream space because they had been soaked in the spiritual energy water for so long, that the spiritual energy had fused with the gourds. Now, he was filling the freshly picked gourds with spiritual energy water. He might be able to trick the bee to bring them into the dream space. After 5 hours, Wang Lin entered the dream space with 4 gourds on his shoulder. After entering the dream, Wang Lin was surprised to find that all the gourds were still with him. He opened them and saw that the water was still inside. He took a drink and found them to still be filled with spiritual energy. Without a word, Wang Lin drank a few mouthfuls and started to cultivate. Every time the spiritual energy in his body dissipated, he drank more spring water. Soon, slivers of spiritual energy started to gather in his body, moving his body toward the first layer of QI condensation. The lights in the surrounding area started to silently enter his body again. With Wang Lin's talent, without the mysterious bead and the spiritual energy water, it would have been many years before he could achieve the first layer of QI condensation. Adding the QI scattering grass to the equation, it would take 30 to 50 years before he would succeed. Taking shunned medication every day for a month sped up the process. Wang Lin also unknowingly used the QI scatter technique, which got rid of the QI scattering grass. But even then, it would still have taken him 10 years. But now, Wang Lin wasn't lacking any spiritual energy. He had this stone bead that allowed him to train 10 times more. The first layer of QI condensation was now in sight. Thank you all for the support, especially for the large golden gifts from Leo. Leo is so touched he could cry. By the end of this month, Leo's video is facing a challenge in the popular rankings, hoping to get more likes for the video. Chapter Turning Mortal. After Wang Lin entered the rank country, he no longer flew, but walked like a mortal. He looked around at this foreign place and sighed. No cultivation method can help one break through from the nascent soul stage to the spirit severing stage. Even pills are useless unless one can find rank 6 or higher pills. In order to reach the spirit severing stage, one must study the heavens and gain their own Tao. That is the only way. Wang Lin didn't join any sect once he entered the rank 4 country because he knew about this. After all, joining a sect won't help him much with reaching the spirit severing stage anyway. If he wanted to join a sect and become its core member, it would take too much time. Time he didn't want to waste. From his 400 years of experience in cultivating, and his experience with other spirit severing cultivators, he understood that an understanding of the heavens was very important for reaching the spirit severing stage. Wang Lin had walked the path of blood for a long time, and all that killing had nothing to do with understanding the heavens. He had a feeling that if he were to continue down this path, he would never be able to reach the spirit-severing stage. In reality, Wang Lin's real cultivation level was in T nascent soul. His main body SG realm prevented his main body from reaching the nascent soul stage, so it was only his avatar that reached the nascent soul stage. Walking on the road, Wang Lin's body gradually changed as his main body went inside and fell into a deep sleep while his avatar came out. Wang Lin had come to an understanding about his G realm, so he won T insist on trying to break through the bottleneck of his G realm. He will also no longer rely on the G realm so much. From now on, it will just be another magic treasure to him. His current magic treasures were too weak to damage spirit-severing cultivators. In order for this magic treasure to rise up in strength, he will need some very rare heavenly treasures, like a rank 6 cultivation country S cultivation planet crystal. After giving up on the G realm, Wang Lin decided to use his avatar to walk the path of a cultivator. If one day his avatar reaches the soul transformation stage, he might have a chance of obtaining the crystal. Then, once he refines it, he might have a chance to break through with his G realm. Wang Lin took a deep breath and took the G realm out of his consciousness. He understood that the most important thing for him to do was to gain an understanding of the heavens, but he had spent most of his life on the path of killing, and this path was incomplete. If he wanted to understand the heavens, then he must start from the beginning and become a mortal. If one wants to turn into an immortal, one must turn into a mortal first. Before he knew it, Wang Lin's mentality changed, and he gained a hint of understanding. However, that hint went by like lightning and Wang Lin wasn't able to capture it. He pondered for a while, then smiled. His cultivation disappeared like melting snow. After a while, he looked no different than a mortal. Wang Lin's eyes revealed a strange light as he grabbed a willow leaf. He put it in his mouth to savor the green taste as he walked along the road. This rank 4 cultivation country was very large, several times larger than Zhao. There were a lot of cultivators, and the amount of mortals had also reached an incredible number. While Wang Lin was walking, he saw people passing by. All of them were carrying some sort of baggage, unlike him, so he attracted a lot of attention. Wang Lin pondered for a little. He went to the side of the road and gathered some thin twigs and made a basket for himself. He then gathered various leaves and herbs to fill the basket. Wang Lin had only walked on the road for a few hours, and had already seen many martial artists from the mortal world pass by on horses. None of them paid any mind to Wang Lin. Every time horses passed by, they would kick up a cloud of dust. However, Wang Lin didn't mind. He dusted the dirt off his clothes and continued walking. But this time, he only walked a bit before a voice behind him shouted, "Make way!" At the same time, a powerful wind came from behind him. Wang Lin quickly dodged to the side and saw a black horse almost touching his body as it passed by. Shortly after, several more horses passed by. One of them was about to bump into Wang Lin when the rider suddenly pulled hard on the reins. The horse let out a loud noise. Its front legs rose up and it moved to the side. Only after taking a few more steps forward did the horse stop. The man riding the horse stared at Wang Lin. He picked up his whip and swung it toward Wang Lin's head while shouting, "Where did this blind person come from? Do you not have eyes?" Wang Lin frowned. However, just as the whip was coming, a middle-aged man came from the side, grabbed the whip and shouted, "Xianxia, what are you doing?" The man snorted. He put away the whip, shot Wang Lin a vicious stare, and left. The middle-aged man didn't look the man as he turned toward Wang Lin and said, "Sorry, little brother, for scaring you. I still have an important matter to attend to, so please forgive me." Wang Lin shook his head and said, "No problem." With that, he dusted the dirt off his clothes. The middle-aged man revealed a surprised expression. From his point of view, Wang Lin was only a normal person with no signs of being a martial artist. But Wang Lin's courage was far above an ordinary person's. The middle-aged man carefully looked at Wang Lin. He smiled and said, "I am Lu Xing. This road only heads toward the capital. I wonder what little brother is heading toward the capital for." With that, he saw the basket on Wang Lin's back and asked with a strange expression, "Is little brother a traveling doctor?" Wang Lin didn't make any excuse and nodded. The middle-aged man smiled. He clasped his hands and jumped on his horse. Suddenly, the horse let out a cry, but instead of going forward, he went back. Wang Lin turned around and saw that 100 meters behind him, a carriage slowly moved forward. Half an hour later, the carriage slowly appeared behind Wang Lin. There were more than 100 people on horses guarding the carriage. All of their eyes were shining, their heads straight. It was clear that they were all expert martial artists. Lu Xing was on the side of the carriage. He was close to the carriage, talking to someone inside. This road was not wide, so after seeing the carriage, Wang Lin stood on the side of the road. As the carriage passed by him, 4 people on horses appeared in front of him to block him from the carriage. Lu Xing turned to look at Wang Lin, and his eyes lit up. He moved his horse next to Wang Lin, then clasped his hands and said, "Little brother, do you have any medication for the evil wind condition?" Wang Lin knew that the other mistook him for a doctor. With his temper, he normally wouldn't bother with this, but he suddenly had some insight. In order to reach the spirit-severing stage, he must be able to understand the heavens. Maybe this was a chance to enter the mortal world. Thinking about it, Wang Lin asked, "Is there someone sick?" The middle-aged man hesitated for a bit and said, "A servant girl is sick and we are still far from the city. The doctors around here tried giving her some medication, but none of them worked." Wang Lin glanced at the carriage and said, "Let me see the patient." Lu Xing wryly smiled and said, "Little brother, do you have medication that can help? If you don't have any, then there is no need to see the patient." Just at that moment, an old voice came from the carriage. It said, "Lu Xing, this person has traveled a lot, so he might have a cure." Lu Xing quickly replied. He jumped down from the horse and said, "I am going to have to trouble you, little brother." Wang Lin followed Lu Xing to the carriage and was about to go up when the old man inside coughed. Lu Xing quickly stopped Wang Lin and said, "Little brother, just look from here. There is no need to go inside." Wang Lin frowned. Thanks to his divine sense, he already knew that there were 3 people inside the carriage. Aside from the old man, there were 2 beautiful ladies. It was very clear that they were a master and her servant. The person who was sick was not the servant, but the master. With his divine sense, Wang Lin could clearly see that the lady wasn't sick due to evil wind entering her body, but from some green gas inside her body. She had clearly been poisoned. Wang Lin said, "Stick your hand out." The lady inside the carriage hesitated for a bit before extending her hand. Wang Lin held her hand for a bit before letting go and reaching into his basket. He took out a leaf and ran his spiritual energy through it once. He handed the leaf to Lu Xing and said, "Have her eat it raw, and she will be cured by tomorrow." Lu Xing looked at the leaf in his hand with a strange expression. No matter how he looked at it, it was only the leaf of a willow tree. Lu Xing bitterly smiled as he thought that he was wrong about this young man. Clearly, this young man was not a doctor, but a madman. Otherwise, who would use willow leaves as medication? If this leaf really was medication, then anyone can grab a bunch from the side of the road. He was about to throw away the leaf when the curtain on the carriage suddenly lifted. An old man filled with wrinkles came out and grabbed the leaf. After looking at it for a long time, his expression changed as he said, "100-year-old willow leaf." He took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at Wang Lin and respectfully asked, "Is there any trick to using this leaf?" Wang Lin faintly smiled and said, "Eating it raw is fine." The old man quickly nodded. He made an expression toward Lu Xing and returned to the carriage. Lu Xing looked at Wang Lin with a strange expression. He couldn't help but wryly smile and said, "Little brother, since you going to the capital too, how about you travel with us?" Wang Lin smiled and said, "I need a horse." After Lu Xing heard this, he immediately said, "Sunlauer, hand over your horse." A or so-year-old youth bitterly smiled. He got off the horse and brought it over. After muttering a few words, he turned around and left. As time goes on, a heavy dizziness is setting in. My mind can't cope. Tomorrow I will continue to burst forth with all my might. In 12 hours that will be doubling the likes for the video, hoping that everyone is ready with 2 likes for Leo. Thank you. Chapter 250, Condensing Evil. Wang Lin examined the horse. It looked very heroic and its eyes were filled with intelligence. When Wang Lin rubbed the horse, its eyes narrowed as it let out a very comfortable expression. This startled Lu Xing. This was the first time he had seen a horse show an expression like this. Wang Lin's left hand pressed against the horse, and he easily jumped onto its back. Lu Xing quickly followed behind as he chatted with Wang Lin and kept looking back at the carriage. Wang Lin looked around at all of the mortals surrounding him as he rode. A feeling he hadn't felt in a long time appeared in his heart. At that moment, the spiritual energy in his body started to move on its own, and all of the surrounding spiritual energy seemed to be attracted to him. If there were any powerful cultivators around, they would be shocked because there was a thick layer of red mist aura surrounding Wang Lin. This aura was very powerful. However, it was not leaking outward, but condensed around Wang Lin. Not to mention mortals. Even most cultivators wouldn't be able to see this red mist aura. This was the murderous aura that Wang Lin had gained from his 400 years of killing. After being part of him for such a long time, it gradually changed into a hostility aura. Eventually, as he killed even more and underwent a change, it became an evil aura that would cause any cultivator's skin to crawl. When this evil aura can be used freely, it can be used like a powerful technique. Also, if a bit of it is used when refining a magic treasure, it would make the treasure much more powerful. The spring wind blew past Wang Lin, and he unconsciously took a deep breath. His eyes radiated an unnoticeable light. He could clearly feel that his spiritual energy was undergoing a change. Although this change was very small, it contained a very mysterious power. The evil aura around Wang Lin loosened a bit. A sliver of it entered his body and fused with his spiritual energy. Gradually, as the carriage slowly moved forward, more and more spiritual energy gathered around Wang Lin. Under the dense spiritual energy, all of the horses suddenly became very lively. Even those mortal martial artists' eyes lit up. They didn't know why, but there was something that was causing their bodies to feel warm and comfortable. After a long time, the spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body settled down, and the spiritual energy around the area dissipated. The martial artists' heads suddenly became clear as they talked among themselves about what they had just experienced. As the group kept moving forward, night eventually fell. A circle of carriages was formed on the side of the road. Some of the servant girls came down from the carriages and started to prepare dinner. Some of them threw a few looks at Wang Lin and talked among themselves. It was not hard to understand why all of the female servants were looking at Wang Lin. Right now, he had an unspeakable charm. Although his looks were normal, he had a very special aura about him. Wang Lin sat leaning against a big tree as he looked at the slowly darkening sky. He was experiencing a kind of peace of mind that he had never experienced in the past 400 years. This was from the ancient god's inheritance of memory. Back when Tusi wasn't able to travel among the stars, he often looked at the sky like this. This peace of mind caused the spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body to resurface again. But the current Wang Lin didn't pay attention to the spiritual energy, and, for the first time, he noticed the red mist aura around him. The red substance slowly dissipated with his mind at peace. He knew that if he kept this up, then the red substance will disappear after several years. Wang Lin had noticed this red substance before, but this was the first time he'd seen it. He knew this was caused by his 400 years of killing, although he knew that allowing this red substance to dissipate would help him enter the spirit-severing stage. He still felt that it was a bit of a waste. Wang Lin pondered for a while. After thinking about it, he started to make the red substance around him boil and slowly condense. However, after shrinking it to 1/10 of its original size, Wang Lin could no longer condense it any farther, no matter how hard they tried. Wang Lin took a deep breath. Just as he was about to try again, he raised his head and looked toward the female servants. He saw a servant girl wearing red walking toward him with smoked meat and wine. A wave of fragrance flowed toward Wang Lin as the girl came closer. She put down the meat and wine as she curiously looked at Wang Lin for a while and said, "Thank you." This girl was the servant girl that was sitting with the young lady in the carriage earlier. He picked up the wine, scanned it with his divine sense, then took a sip. A hot and spicy taste suddenly entered his body. In these 400 years, this was one of only a few times that Wang Lin had drank any wine. Back before he entered the path of cultivation, his father would only take out wine when his fourth uncle visited. Whenever that happened, Wang Lin would secretly drink a bit, then giggle toward his father and fourth uncle with a red face. With a hint of sadness, Wang Lin took another big gulp. The girl opened her mouth wanting to say something, but then someone called her. The girl responded. Her pretty eyes looked at Wang Lin before she turned around and left. Because Wang Lin was a cultivator, he didn't need to eat, so mortals' food held no attraction to him. That smoked meat was left where it was, but this wine reminded him of something, so he continued to drink until it was all gone. In the middle of the night, the martial artists set up fire pits. Bursts of laughter came from the men grouped around them. As Wang Lin listened to their laughter, he couldn't help but faintly smile. Some of the martial artists became very brave after drinking a bit and went to flirt with the servant girls for some private time. Seeing these mortals, Wang Lin unconsciously thought of Li Muan. At that moment, Lu Xing arrived next to Wang Lin with 2 jugs of wine. After passing over a jug to Wang Lin, he sat down next to him and said, "Little brother, your medication was indeed effective. My lady is already better. Here, a toast to you." With that, he tilted the jug and filled his cup, but then he saw that Wang Lin didn't even use a cup and drank a large gulp directly from the jag. He let out a laugh. After drinking the wine in the cup, he copied Wang Lin and drank a large gulp from the jag. "Didn't you say that it was the servant girl who was sick? How come it is the young lady now?" Wang Lin faintly smiled as he looked at Lu Xing. Lu Xing's old face turned red. He felt very embarrassed as he slapped his leg and said, "Little brother, this is my fault. How about this? Once we arrive at the capital city, if you have any problems, you can come to the Southern Heaven store to find me. As long as I am capable, I won't hesitate to help." Wang Lin let out a smile. He no longer talked. He only slowly savored the taste of the wine. Lu Xing looked at the empty jug on the ground, then looked at the almost empty jug in Wang Lin's hand. He smiled and said, "Little brother has very good tolerance for wine. It's lonely here. How about we go over to the fire and compete with my fellow brothers?" Wang Lin reflexively wanted to reject, but after pondering for a bit, he nodded. Wang Lin followed Lu Xing to the fire. There were a lot of martial artists there. They were all laughing as they talked about fun events they had encountered. Lu Xing went up and kicked the person who was talking and jokingly scolded, "Wang Lao, I have heard you talk about Xing Fin Lao's little peach many times. I guess she served you well. When we get back, I'm going to check if you were just bragging." The person named Wang moved over to make 2 spots for Lu Xing and Wang Lin as he said, "Since you take care of business so fast, I'll cover the bill. I'll still have time to go after you." The moment that was said, everyone around started laughing and Lu Xing jokingly scolded a bit before sitting down with Wang Lin. Wang Lin casually looked at the mortals around him. He was feeling a lot of regret. Although these people's lives were short and just a breath from him was enough to kill them many times over, their happiness was something he didn't have. Tonight, Wang Lin drank a lot of wine. Although he didn't talk much, the others around him got familiar with him and laughed and drank with him. Later, some brave and bold servant girls joined them as well, including the servant girl who gave him food. However, she only sat next to Wang Lin. Her gleaming gaze often landed on him, but no one knew what she was thinking. It wasn't until midnight that everyone fell asleep from being drunk, and the servant girls all returned to sleep in the carriages. Aside from few that were standing guard in the distance, everyone was asleep. The camp was completely silent, aside from a few popping sounds from the fire. This sound not only didn't disturb anyone's sleep, but helped them sleep even better. Wang Lin stood up and walked to a large tree before sitting down. Sitting while leaning against a tree, he felt waves of calmness. Earlier, only for a while, he forgot that he was a cultivator and thought that he was a mortal like everyone else. He closed his eyes and checked his body. To his surprise, his cultivation level had broken through the early stage of nascent soul into the mid-stage. Although he was already at the peak of the early stage and could break through at any time, he didn't think it would be this fast. However, the red substance around his body had dissipated a little. He had a feeling that if he just lets this red substance dissipate, he will regret it in the future. His divine sense entered the red substance once more to condense it. The second watch has come. So thankful for the praise from the new clan leader. Last night Leo started from the starting point, immediately saw a new follower. I'm ecstatic. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 251, Spiritual Retreat. Wang Lin spent the night condensing the evil aura around him. The only sound at night, besides the crickets, was the snoring of some of the men. Gradually, the sun rose up in the sky and day replaced night. Wang Lin opened his eyes. He stared at the east and took a deep breath. 2 purple key dragons, invisible to mortal eyes, entered his body. The 2 QI dragons cycled once through his body, then exited it. The cycle continued. Wang Lin felt like his body was very light. It was as if he could just walk directly into the sky. This kind of feeling was something that Wang Lin had never experienced in the past 400 years. It was very clear that only after reaching a certain relaxed state of mind could he feel this aura from the heavens. In one night's time, the red substance around Wang Lin once again shrunk to 1/10th of its previous size. Wang Lin was in no rush. He knew that condensing this red substance was not something he could rush. He believed that it was something that will take a long time. Early in the morning, the people woke up one by one and washed themselves. The old man walked out of the carriage and took a deep breath. He started to perform different types of movements. After just one glance, Wang Lin was very shocked. Although this person's movements didn't have any offensive power, every move would strengthen the body. When used together, their effects were even better. A while later, the old man stopped and let out a sigh. He hesitated for a bit, then walked toward Wang Lin. When he got near, he smiled and asked, "Little brother, did you rest well last night?" Wang Lin silently nodded. The old man hesitated for a bit before asking, "I wanted to ask where little brother got that 100-year-old willow leaf." With that, his eyes were filled with a pleading look. Wang Lin said, "I picked it up on the side of the road." The old man thought about it for a long time. He bitterly smiled and said, "Little brother, you were very lucky." He chatted with Wang Lin for a while. No matter how he tried, he couldn't get any information out of Wang Lin. The old man secretly sighed as he turned around and left. If we were to compare ages, Wang Lin was old enough to be the old man's ancestor. The old man's trick might work on someone new to the world, but it was nothing compared to what Wang Lin had been through. While following the group, Wang Lin gradually adjusted himself and eventually became part of the group. Several days passed, and within these days that little servant girl would always come to talk to Wang Lin. However, she would always talk for a while, then her little face would become red. No one knew what she was thinking. Wang Lin couldn't help but bitterly smile when he saw the light in the girl's eyes. He had seen that light in Lima Wan's eyes many times, so he knew what was going on. However, Wang Lin knew that he was possibly too old to even be her ancestor, so there was always a strange feeling in his heart. On this day, the capital appeared before them. This rank 4 cultivation country's capital city was really gorgeous, but in Wang Lin's eyes, it was very plain with no color to it. If it wasn't for the swirl of spiritual energy, Wang Lin wouldn't even bother to look at it. Wang Lin spread out his divine sense, and the entire city appeared in his mind. In the capital, there were a total of 9 swirls of spiritual energy. The things that were spreading out spiritual energy weren't cultivators, but towering black pillars. The amount of spiritual energy released by the pillars depended on each pillar's size. There was one very large pillar at the center with the other 8 pillars surrounding it. These pillars were very large. Even the smallest would require at least 10 people holding hands to make a circle around it. As for the biggest one, it would take over 100 people. There were people cultivating inside each of the 9 pillars. There was also a formation outside the pillars that prevented any divine sense from checking inside. But this formation was completely useless against Wang Lin. He could see with one glance that all of the people sitting inside the pillars were cultivators. The most powerful was at the late stage of core formation, and the weakest was at the late stage of foundation establishment. Wang Lin was very interested in these strange buildings. As the group entered the city, Lu Xing noticed that Wang Lin was still staring at the 9 black pillars, so he whispered, "Brother Wang, don't keep staring at them. If you are noticed by someone, there will be trouble." Wang Lin rubbed the horse and asked, "Brother Lu, what are these black pillars?" Lu Xing revealed a look of envy and whispered, "Those are immortal pillars. This place is my country's capital, so it is protected by immortals, which is why there are immortal pillars. The king recruited the best craftsmen in the country to craft these 9 pillars as the immortals requested." Immortal pillars. Wang Lin's expression was strange. There are immortals living inside the immortal pillars. My father once personally saw immortals fly out of them. Lu Xing's voice was filled with pride. It was as if his father seeing an immortal was something that benefited him. If he knew that Wang Lin, whom he had spent the past 7 days with, was thousands of times stronger than the immortals that his ancestors saw, how would he feel? It has to be said that if the cultivator that his ancestor saw was present, that person would have to respectfully call Wang Lin Sr. Wang Lin withdrew his gaze. He smiled, but didn't speak. On a bridge between the northern and southern parts of the capital, Wang Lin said goodbye to Lu Xing's group. Although Lu Xing hadn't been together with Wang Lin for long, he was very fond of Wang Lin. He patted his chest and told Wang Lin that if he ever ran into any issues, he could go and find him for help. As for Lao Air, who had to give up his horse for Wang Lin, He had completely acknowledged him after drinking together so many times. Lu Xing also said that if someone bullied Wang Lin, he would personally get his boss to act. Finally, the old man walked out of the carriage. Behind him was a young lady with a white veil over her head. Next to her was the pretty servant girl. Seeing that Wang Lin was about to leave, the servant girl's eyes were filled with melancholy. The old man talked a bit with Wang Lin, and the lady with the veil over her head smiled. She didn't join in the conversation. After bowing, she turned around and left without a word. The servant girl exchanged a few words with the lady. She then took a little pouch and walked up to Wang Lin. She handed him the pouch and said, "Sister wants me to thank you. There are 10 pieces of gold here. This is the consultation fee." Wang Lin didn't refuse. It had been over 400 years since he had touched the mortal's currency. Wang Lin clasped his hands and turned around. It wasn't until Wang Lin was already far away that the servant girl sighed and returned to the carriage. The group passed over the bridge and entered the southern section of the city. Wang Lin pinched the 10 pieces of gold with his hand as he walked through the capital. This truly was the capital. There was an ocean of people and all sorts of vendors selling stuff on the streets. Shortly after, Wang Lin's eyes slightly lit up. In this capital of the mortal world, he saw many cultivators among the mortals. Although the highest level cultivators were only around the 12th or 14th layer of QI condensation, it was something that was very rare to see in other countries. After pondering for a while, he thought of the black pillars. He guessed that this was what one could call a speciality of a rank cultivation country. Wang Lin walked casually through the streets until it was afternoon. It was clear that some of the shops weren't for mortals, as they sold magic treasures for cultivators. There were restrictions outside of these shops that prevented mortals from entering. The mortals of the capital seemed to know of this, as no mortals would walk into these shops. As Wang Lin passed through, he would walk into shops to check them out. Suddenly, as he walked out of a shop, there was shouting from one direction. He looked over and saw a messy old man being beaten up. The old man's wails were coming out non-stop. His voice was shrilling. At the same time, laughs resounded as mouthfuls of blood were coughed out by the old man. It seemed to follow a rhythm. Every time the man punched him, he would cough out a mouthful of blood. After the man punched the old man several times, he stood up and cursed, "Old thing, don't come to my shop again. I'll beat you up every time you come. You are already this age and still so foolish." After he finished speaking, he spat at the old man. A middle-aged man standing next to Wang Lin sighed. "That old man gets beaten up every day just to see the female servants change. Is it worth it?" Ah. Wang Lin was stunned. He looked at the old man before turning around to leave. But before he took more than a few steps, he turned around and saw the old man proudly walking toward Wang Lin as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Wang Lin dodged to the side and his eyes became cold. The old man walked past Wang Lin. He didn't stop, but then suddenly turned around. His face was filled with surprise as he carefully examined Wang Lin and said, "Little brother, I see that you are filled with talent and energy. You don't seem to be a mortal." Wang Lin frowned. With his divine sense, he could easily see that this old man was only a mortal without any cultivation. This old man's body also contained many wounds. It was clear that they were the result of constant beatings. Wang Lin didn't have any interest in this person, so he turned around and left. If this old man kept bothering him, Wang Lin wouldn't mind helping him go to hell. The old man revealed a look of pity as he shook his head and said, "If there is no way to give you pointers, then you might never reach the soul formation stage." Sigh. Wang Lin suddenly stopped. All of the pressure in his body suddenly released. He turned around and stared at the old man. "Who are you?" he asked. The old man didn't feel any discomfort toward Wang Lin's pressure. He placed both of his hands behind his back, looked into the sky, and with a voice filled with age said, "You don't need to know who I am. You just need to know that I can help you reach the soul formation stage." Wang Lin's eyes lit up. No matter how he looked at this old man, he was merely a mortal, but the old man was able to instantly tell what his cultivation level was. The only possibility was that this old man's cultivation level was far above the soul formation stage, so when the old man hid his cultivation, Wang Lin wasn't able to detect it. Wang Lin frowned and asked, "How can I reach the soul formation stage?" The old man looked at Wang Lin and said, "I am already old. The moment I get hungry, I can remember anything. I know a very good restaurant. Let us go there and talk while we eat." He licked his lips while his stomach growled of hunger. Fortune Restaurant was one of the most luxurious restaurants in the capital. The old man walked in with his head up and his chest puffed. It seemed it was beneath the old man to eat in the main hall. After he entered, he walked directly into the private room. When the server saw the old man, his expression became strange, but when he saw Wang Lin walking behind the old man, he quickly went out to serve them. Wang Lin frowned very hard. He felt like there was something going on here. The old man seemed to be very familiar with this restaurant. He ordered a bunch of dishes that Wang Lin had never heard of. The table was covered with food, and the old man started to eat as if he hadn't eaten in days. Wang Lin didn't say a word as he drank wine. His gaze swept past the old man and became even colder. After the old man had eaten for a while, Wang Lin coldly said, "I am listening." The old man grabbed a piece of pork shoulder and took a big bite as he said this. "Wait until I finish eating this piece." After that, the old man ate the entire pork shoulder in a few bites. He let out a burp as he rubbed his hand on his body and said, "The soul formation stage requests one to comprehend the heavens, but I believe you already understand that. In addition to this, you must form a domain. Do you know what a domain is? Little guy, once you comprehend what a domain is, you aren't far from the soul formation stage. As for the domain, once I use the restroom, we will talk more." The old man suddenly touched his stomach and stood up with a bitter face. He seemed to be afraid that Wang Lin wouldn't let him go, so he let out a loud fart. An awful smell filled the room. The old man let out an embarrassed smile and quickly left. Wang Lin waved his hand, and a gust of wind appeared to blow away the stench in the room. At the same time, his divine sense was locked onto the old man. The old man's series of actions were very suspicious, but what he said about soul formation matched with what Wang Lin knew. These were things that mortals couldn't possibly know. With a look of doubt, a cold light appeared in his eyes as he stood up. He noticed the old man leaving the restaurant through the back door and quickly blending into the crowd. Wang Lin's body disappeared from the restaurant and reappeared outside. His eyes were cold as he casually followed the old man. He only saw that the old man had somehow found the time to change clothes. He was picking his teeth with a small piece of wood. After he picked out a piece of meat, he threw it away and picked at his teeth again. As the old man walked, he suddenly stopped and looked at a middle-aged man that was wearing a purple robe. His eyes lit up as he let out a smile and quickly walked toward the middle-aged man. The middle man turned around and frowned at the old man. He then proceeded to ignore the old man. The old man suddenly said, "Little brother, I see that you are filled with talent and energy. You don't seem to be a mortal." The middle-aged man was stunned. He turned around and looked at the old man with cold eyes. The old man revealed a look of pity as he shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, if there is no one to guide you, you might never reach the core formation stage." The middle-aged man's eyes lit up as he asked, "Who the hell are you?" The old man shook his head and said, "Who I am is not important. How about we find a place to relax? While we relax, we can talk." Wang Lin's face became very dark. That middle-aged man was also a cultivator, but his cultivation level was only foundation establishment. It was very clear that this old man had learned these things to rip off cultivators. But that old man was still alive, so this matter didn't seem simple. Unless Wang Lin was the first person he had ever scammed, the old man wouldn't be alive today. If a cultivator was played by a mortal, then no matter who it was, they wouldn't let the old man off easily. What was most curious about all of this was that this old man seemed to have the ability to see through someone's cultivation instantly. If the person was a foundation establishment cultivator, he would say core formation. If the person was a core formation cultivator, he would say nascent soul. And if the person was like Wang Lin, who was at the nascent soul stage, he'd say soul formation. Wang Lin followed this old man the entire afternoon. He wanted to see what exactly this old man's secret was. In one afternoon's time, the old man had tricked a total of 4 people, including Wang Lin. What was interesting was that he only asked for food and drink. The worst it got was a trip to a brothel. But the 3 others, including the purple-robed man, didn't have any intentions of looking for revenge. It seemed the old man's words had some kind of magical effect on them. The more Wang Lin saw, the more shocked he was. The old man seemed to have a very good understanding of how to break into the next realm of cultivation. He could just casually say a few things and enlighten them. As a result, none of them believed that he was a scammer. Instead, they felt as if they had met a senior, so they became very respectful. After a while, Wang Lin began to ponder. Then, he withdrew his divine sense and stopped following the old man. This old man was too mysterious, and Wang Lin felt that it was better for him to not dig too much into it. The old man was holding a woman in his arms inside a brothel. As Wang Lin's divine sense withdrew, his eyes lit up. He faintly smiled as he looked at Wang Lin's direction and muttered nascent soul and the mid-stage of nascent soul. Should I help him? As he was thinking, the woman in his arm called him with a flirty voice. The old man threw Wang Lin out of his mind and went to enjoy himself. After he stopped thinking about the old man, Wang Lin pondered for a while. He went to a remote area in the west side of the city and rented a shop for 8 pieces of gold. After he cleaned it out a bit, he moved in. If he wanted to reach the soul formation stage, then he must first transform into a mortal to experience mortal life and comprehend the heavens. This was a method that Wang Lin had thought of to break past the nascent soul stage. He calmly looked at the shop, then sat down cross-legged in the back room and began to experience the world of mortals. The current Wang Lin was camouflaged inside the populated mortal capital city as he calmly began to comprehend the heavens and life and death. He was fully preparing himself to break past the boundary of the nascent soul stage and into the soul formation stage. The new chapter is late, but it has over 500 more words than the previous ones. I hope not to be hit. Wishing for the like button for the video. Chapter 252 Magic Treasure. The shop that Wang Lin rented wasn't T on the main street, but to the side. If one didn't look for it, it was very difficult to find, but Wang Lin didn't mind. After a night of cultivating, the red substance around him condensed even more. When morning arrived, Wang Lin opened the door of the shop. Like a mortal, he cleaned the shop up. Then, his body moved and disappeared from the shop. When he returned, his bag of holding contained quite a few large trees that he had pulled up along with their roots. He cleaned the bark off the trees and turned them into wood blocks. Wang Lin began to recall his childhood when his father taught him how to carve. These memories gradually filled his mind. Wang Lin pondered for a long time. He then grabbed a large square block of wood. With a gentle wave of his hand, the square block of wood was cut into 10 pieces. Gradually, as Wang Lin carved, he seemed to gain something he had lost 400 years ago. With every stroke, he seemed to return to his childhood, back to when he lived in that small village. At that moment, the spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body began to move. It became deeply ingrained within the statue he was carving. Time flew by and night arrived again when Wang Lin regained his senses. He looked at the block of wood in his hand. The block of wood had turned into a wood carving. The carving was that of a middle-aged man with a kind smile. The middle-aged man wore a coarse robe and his hands were filled with rough lines. Although this wood carving was very rough, it seemed to be alive. Waves of spiritual energy spread out from the carving. As Wang Lin stared at the carving, he began to feel pain in his heart. His right hand gently rubbed the carving as he muttered, "Father, your son misses you greatly." After pondering for a long time, Wang Lin moved the wood carving to the side. He picked up another piece of wood and wholeheartedly began to carve again, stroke by stroke. The night began to get cold, but going a day without sleep was nothing for Wang Lin. Back when he was being chased, he would be running for days. The moment the sun rose, the carving that Wang Lin was working on took shape. This wood carving was shaped like a middle-aged woman. Her loving eyes looked into the distance as if she was waiting for her child to return. He placed the 2 wood carvings next to each other, and let out a long sigh as he took out another piece of wood and began to carve. Time slowly passed. Wang Lin kept on carving and only took breaks when he became extremely tired. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The number of things in Wang Lin's shop gradually increased. The shelves along the wall of the shop were filled with wood carvings that looked alive. There were males and females, young people and old people, and all in various poses. Reveal character. These wood carvings were all residents of the village that was Wang Lin's hometown. In a way, Wang Lin had revived them. In this month, Wang Lin didn't have a single customer, but he didn't mind as he was immersed in carving. He even stopped cultivating. One day, Wang Lin held a half-completed wood carving in his hand. This wood carving, for some unknown reason, released a primal aura. If any cultivator from the Sea of Devils saw this carving, they would immediately recognize it as a dragon. This dragon was the first spirit beast that Wang Lin met when he was with Li Muan. While he was carving, the bell rang as the door was pushed open by someone. A very strong-looking boy carefully looked inside. The boy saw Wang Lin and was startled, but he was immediately in awe after seeing all of the carvings in the room. He asked, "Uncle, did you carve all of this? They are so pretty. Can you give me one?" Wang Lin let out a smile and put down the carving in his hand. He grabbed a wood carving from one of the shelves. This was the carving of a person that Wang Lin was very familiar with, named Wang Hao. The boy before him looked similar to Wang Hao back then. After the boy received the wood carving, he let out a cheer. He held it in his hands like a treasure and said to Wang Lin with a crisp voice, "Thank you, uncle. I am from the iron workshop across the street. Goodbye." With that, he ran out of the shop and shouted, "Mom! Look, uncle gave me this." Wang Lin stood up and walked to the entrance of the shop. He saw a man and woman come out of the shop across the street. The two looked lovingly at the boy. The man took the wood carving, and his eyes suddenly lit up. He walked toward Wang Lin with the wood carving and said, "Little brother, kids don't know too well. How much for this carving?" Wang Lin shook his head and said, "I gave it to him. It is only a piece of wood." The boy's father hesitated for a bit. He looked at Wang Lin and smiled. "You just arrived here, correct? I haven't seen you before." Wang Lin smiled and nodded. The boy's father smiled and said, "Little brother, if you don't mind, come over for a meal. I have homemade fruit wine that is much better than those from those restaurants." Wang Lin felt a very strange feeling in his heart. This was a feeling he hadn't felt in 400 years. After hesitating for a bit, he nodded. The boy's mother was a very kind woman. Although she was very young, she was very patient and mild. From looking at them, Wang Lin could tell that they were a very happy family. Their child was cute, and the couple loved each other. Reveal character. Inside the iron workshop, there was a square table with a few homemade dishes on it. Even though Wang Lin didn't need to eat anymore, he still picked up his chopsticks and ate a few bites. While drinking the homemade fruit wine that the man was so proud of and eating a loving homemade meal, Wang Lin's mind became even calmer than it was when he was with the caravan. The spiritual energy in his body moved in a way that it never had before. This wine was indeed very good wine. It had a good aftertaste. Since this day, a new essential entered Wang Lin's life, the fruit wine. The boy would come almost every day to watch Wang Lin carve, and every time he came, he would bring a jug of fruit wine. Gradually, Wang Lin's shop was filled with wood carvings, and a majority of them were beasts. He had carved out almost all of the beasts he had met in the past 400 years. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't finish the carvings of those high-quality spirit beasts and desolate beasts. There were large amounts of spiritual energy gathered within each carving. Mortals couldn't feel it, but if any cultivator were to pass by, they would be terrified. That was because the power of the spiritual energy in these carvings wasn't weaker than any low-quality magic treasure. Some of the spiritual energy in these carvings matched mid-quality magic treasures. How could these still be considered wood carvings? These were obviously magic treasures made of dead wood. The end of the year is here, brothers. Give a like for Leo. Chapter 253, Carving of a Dragon. Life is like a bowl of water. In its blandness, there's a barely noticeable sweetness. Wang Lin felt like his soul was being cleansed by this life without killing. He forgot his identity as a cultivator, and his 400 years of killing. He had truly blended into the mortal world, and was experiencing the bitter and the sweet aspects of mortal life. Every morning, Wang Lin would get up and open the door to his shop before beginning to carve. His shop was already filled with countless wood carvings. All of the neighboring shops gradually found out that the shop Wang Lin was residing in had changed hands. Everyone had very good feelings toward this quiet and elegant young man. As time passed, Wang Lin gradually began to have customers. Although they couldn't see the spiritual energy in the wood carvings, they could see how intricate the carvings were. Over time, Wang Lin's shop gained a bit of fame in the area. In the blink of an eye, 1 year had passed. In this year, Wang Lin never saw that old man again. Although he would occasionally think about the old man, those thoughts gradually faded. He was completely immersed in carving, searching for that long-lost joy. In Wang Lin's shop, the most common carvings were these lifelike carvings of beasts. All of these beasts were creatures that mortals had never seen before. In fact, even if cultivators were to come, they would barely be able to recognize them. After all, this place was too far from the Sea of Devils. The world was large, and there were many different types of beasts, so there was no way for one person to know them all. At the moment, Wang Lin held a square piece of wood in his hand. He moved his hand, and a turtle-shaped beast gradually emerged from the piece of wood. Looking at the carving in his hand, he put down his carving knife and picked up a jug. Just as he was about to drink from it, he realized that there was no wine left. At this time, Daniu would normally come to watch him carve and bring along a jug of wine. Sure enough, before long, Daniu, who had grown a head taller in the past year, walked into the shop. Daniu was that boy, and although he was only 12 years old, he was very tall. His body was much stronger than it was 1 year ago. After he entered the shop, he let out an unhappy sound as he sat down next to Wang Lin. He said, "Uncle Wang, you should go to my house sometime and talk with my dad. He is always making me learn the art of ironworks, but I don't want to learn. If anything, I want to learn Uncle S carving skills." With that, he placed the jug of wine next to Wang Lin. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the incomplete carving in Wang Lin's hand. Wang Lin laughed and took a gulp of the fruit wine. This fruit wine was sweet with a hint of spiciness, causing his belly to heat up. This wine had become a daily essential to Wang Lin over the past year. Daniu looked at the carving. Confused, he asked, "Uncle Wang, what animal are you carving now? Why does it look like a turtle?" Wang Lin rubbed Daniu's head and said, "This is not a turtle but a creature called Zhonggu. Although it looks like a turtle, it is far more powerful." Daniu uncertainly nodded. In this past year, he had seen all kinds of animals inside Wang Lin's shop, and every single one of them were ones he had never seen before. Wang Lin held the carving knife and began to carve the creature's features stroke by stroke. This turtle-looking creature was in fact a rare, mid-quality spirit beast in the Sea of Devils. If it became angry, normal cultivators wouldn't be able to withstand its strength at all. But Wang Lin had killed many of these types of beasts, and he has consumed a lot of their cores. Thus, its image completely formed in Wang Lin's mind, and his hand didn't pause for a single moment. Half an hour later, Wang Lin poked hard at where its eyes were supposed to be. At that moment, the carving seemed to have come to life. The beast looked into the sky. Its eyes revealed a hint of frustration and fear. Its mouth wide was opening, as if it were letting out waves of silent roars. An invisible aura that's impossible for mortals to detect spread out from it. But as the aura spread out, Wang Lin touched it with his right hand, and the aura disappeared. Wang Lin took a deep breath and casually put the carving on a shelf. In this past year, Wang Lin found that he could only carve up to mid-quality spirit beasts. As for high-quality spirit beasts, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't complete the carving. Every time he tried to carve a high-quality spirit beast, he would lose control during the last few strokes, causing the carving to shatter. Wang Lin understood that this was because his cultivation level wasn't high enough. After all, a high-quality spirit beast was the same as the soul formation stage for humans. Daniu's eyes revealed a mesmerized look. In this past year, he had come to watch Wang Lin carve every day. He gradually became addicted. In this past year, he secretly tried to carve with a carving knife, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't carve anything decent. Now that he saw Wang Lin easily finish a carving, he couldn't hold it in anymore and asked Wang Lin. Wang Lin pondered a little. He raised his head and said to the boy, "Carving requires comprehension. If you want to learn, then you must watch me for 60 years. After 60 years, you can carve on your own." Daniu stuck out his tongue and said, 60 years, but I've seen the carpenter in the southern part of the city. He is only 40 years old, but his carvings are pretty good too." Wang Lin drank a gulp of wine and said, "I am different from him." Daniu's eyes were filled with confusion. He clearly didn't understand the meaning in those words. At that moment, loud noises suddenly came from outside. Daniu ran outside. Not long after, he poked his head back in and said, "Uncle Wang, the Shu family's eldest son came back. He is followed by more than 10 carriages and a lot of people. He looks very cool." With that, he ran out again. Wang Lin didn't mind. He picked up another piece of wood and began to recall the scenes from the land of the ancient god, of that large, desolate beast that left a deep impression in his mind. He hesitated for a while, then began to carve again. Time slowly passed. More than an hour later, the door to the shop was opened by someone. Deniu happily came in. Behind him was a very sturdy-looking young man. The young man looked around at the carvings, and his eyes lit up. Deniu quickly walked next to Wang Lin. He made a few expressions and whispered, "Don't he try to sell them for too much?" With that, he quickly turned around and loudly said, "Master Shu, this is the shop I was telling you about. Look at these carvings. They are in no way inferior Carpenter Zhou's products. How about buying a few?" Wang Lin smiled. This Deniu obviously saw that Wang Lin had many customers in this past year, so when a rich person came by, he pulled that person to Wang Lin's shop. The young man named Shu looked around the shop, and his eyes became even brighter. He was very different from Deniu. He had seen a lot, especially after becoming confidant of Lord Nana's son. He could tell with a glance that the quality of these carvings was several times higher than the famous Carpenter Zhou's carvings. Although Carpenter Zhou's carvings were also very lifelike, they were still missing something. After pondering a little, he finally understood. The one thing that Carpenter Zhou's carvings were missing was life. One seemed almost real, and one seemed almost alive. A one-word difference made them miles apart. The young man named Shu's eyes were shining as he walked up and picked up a carving. This carving was the dragon that Wang Lin had carved 1 year ago. The dragon's body was coiled, its head was facing the sky, and every scale on its body was expertly carved. What shocked the young man named Shu the most was that when he held the carving he felt like it was alive. Terrified, his right hand suddenly loosened and the carving fell to the ground. Deniu already knew the expression on the young man's face, and he also knew that when someone touches the carving, they experience a mysterious feeling, which was why he mostly looked and rarely touched them. With a thud, the carving fell to the ground. Good thing it was made of wood, because falling to the ground occasionally one break it. The young man named Shu's face turned red and he said, "Master Wang, what animal is this? Why does it look a bit like a snake to me?" Before Wang Lin replied, Deniu puffed his chest and said, "This is a dragon. Do you know what a dragon is? It is an immortal creature." Dragon, the young man named Shu remembered that name and asked, "For how much are you selling this dragon carving?" Wang Lin casually smiled and said, 10 pieces of gold. The moment Deniu heard this, he secretly sighed and thought that it was over. He had brought quite a few people to this shop in the past year, but every time people heard the prices, they would shake their heads and leave. But he couldn't believe that the young man named Shu only frowned and put 10 pieces of gold down on the table. The young man took off his coat, wrapped it around the dragon carving, and quickly left. Deniu stared dumbfoundedly at the 10 pieces of gold on the table. His eyes shined as he muttered, "Incredible, a single wood carving can sell for 10 pieces of gold. My dad can only make 1 piece of gold with 1 month of work, and even that is rare." After muttering to himself, he made a decision. It was only 60 years. He will do whatever it takes to learn this art. Once he has it mastered, he won't have to worry about money for the rest of his life. The current him didn't think about how it would take 60 years before he could create carvings. Even if he didn't have to worry about money, that was only in 60 years. The young man named Shu left the shop and quickly went home to say goodbye to his parents. He didn't even eat the dinner his parents prepared and quickly took all of the people and rushed back toward Nen Palace in the east side of the city. The last 2 days of the month are upon us, wishing for the like button for the VIDEO. Right now, it's about doubling the likes for the VIDEO. Very grateful and will return the favor. Chapter 254, never seen it before. Wang Lin grabbed the gold on the table and casually threw it into a small basket without looking. As for the carvings in the store, aside from the ones of his parents and loved ones, he didn't care about them at all. These things were only tools in his eyes, tools to help him calm his heart and comprehend the heavens. He believed that when he can carve a statue of a soul-forming cultivator or spirit beast, his cultivation will have a breakthrough. Deniu left the shop in a trance. As he walked, he kept muttering to himself, but no one knew what he was muttering about. Wang Lin took a gulp of fruit wine and continued to immerse himself in carving again. As he carved, wood shavings fell to the ground, and the block of wood took shape. A powerful aura came from the carving, but the aura couldn't spread and was trapped inside the carving. With every stroke of his carving knife, the aura became even stronger. Slowly, the shape of a large dragon appeared on the wood, but Wang Lin's carving knife began to hesitate. He pondered for a long time, and then let out a sigh. The carving knife disappeared from his hand. With his left hand, he casually tossed the incomplete carving into a large box. Inside the box were more than a dozen incomplete carvings. If one looked closely at these carvings, they would see that they were various people and spirit beasts. Hunchback Meng, Ancient Emperor, Sixth Desired Devil Lord, high-quality spirit beasts, and even desolate beasts. Although these carvings were all of different things, the one thing they had in common was that they were all carvings of people and beasts above the soul formation level. In this past year, Wang Lin had tried multiple times to carve a person or spirit beast that was at the soul formation level, but they all failed. If he forced himself to complete the carving, then the carving would turn into dust. He pondered a little with his eyes closed. Suddenly, a red substance about 1 palm thick appeared around him. The red substance was the evil aura that had been condensed a lot by Wang Lin this past year. Wang Lin was very satisfied with the result. He actually didn't forcefully condense the evil aura, it just naturally happened thanks to his actions. Wang Lin believed that in just 1 more year, he will be able to compress this evil aura to its limit. Getting rid of this evil aura won't raise his cultivation level though. But Wang Lin always believed that if he just lets this evil aura disappear, he will regret it in the future. It was the instinct of a cultivator that knows that they might need something in the future that made Wang Lin decide to condense the evil aura. The new father's voice came in from outside. Brother Wang, your sister-in-law has made a few good dishes today. Come over and eat, then us brothers can drink a few cups. Wang Lin's eyes suddenly opened, revealing an ancient light. The light slowly disappeared and Wang Lin went back to being a normal person. He held the jug, walked 2 steps, then hesitated for a bit before grabbing some gold from the basket, and walked out. As for that young man named Shu, he was currently sitting in his carriage. His heart was pounding as he held the package in his hands. His eyes were filled with excitement. He didn't think that his visit home to see his parents would allow him to meet a person that could create this kind of wood carving. It can be said that the king's only hobby was to collect these kinds of things. Whether it was made of stone or wood, it didn't matter what kind of material. As long as it was a sculpture, the king liked them. And the prince was a very filial son. If he brings this to the prince, he will be well rewarded. Thinking about it, the young man named Shu took a deep breath. This team of more than 10 carriages moved quickly through the capital, but he still wished they could go faster so he could return to the palace sooner. After a long time, the carriage stopped. The young man named Shu quickly opened the door and rushed into the palace. In the eastern courtyard, the young man stopped before a very elegant building and said, "Prince, Shu Tao wishes to meet you for an important matter." After a while, a lazy voice came from the building saying, "Shu Tao, didn't you go home to visit your relatives? How come you read back so early? If there is anything, we can talk tomorrow." Shu Tao was able to vaguely hear some charming and tempting voices from the palace. He hesitated for a bit. Normally, it would really not be a good time to bother the prince, but he was very confident with the item he was holding. He clenched his teeth and said, "Prince, I really do have an important matter. When I was on my way home, I found a wood carving. If the king saw this wood carving, he would definitely be happy." Silence came from the building. After a while, a dissatisfied voice came from inside. "Come in then. But if this item isn't as good as you say, then you be losing this month's pay." Shu Tao quickly walked into the palace and saw a giant bed covered by a veil. A slightly pale young man sat at the edge of the bed. His eyes were slightly gloomy. Shu Tao placed his coat on the ground, then carefully opened it up, revealing the dragon carving within. The moment the young man saw the wood carving, his eyes suddenly became sharp. He stood up and quickly walked up to the wood carving. He reached out and grabbed the carving with his right hand. Just as Shu Tao was about to warn the youth, he suddenly heard the youth yell. The youth waved his hand and the wood carving disappeared. He said, "Good! Shu Tao, you have done a great service." With that, he slapped a broken-looking bag that hung on his waist. Suddenly, a wave of purple gas came out of the bag and surrounded the youth. The gas dissipated, and the youth was now wearing a purple robe. The moment the purple gas appeared, a breeze blew through the room, lifting up the veil a bit. 2 charming screams came from the bed as the veil revealed 2 beautiful bodies. Shu Tao's eyes involuntarily looked over. He swallowed hard and averted his gaze, not daring to look. The young wasn't immortal, but a cultivator, However, his cultivation level wasn't T high. He was only at the 8th layer of QI condensation. He looked at Shu Tao and noticed Shu Tao's gaze. He laughed and said, "Meiji, come out. Today, you belong to Shu Tao." A charming response came from the bed as a beautiful figure walked out of the bed. She leisurely walked over, grabbed the dumbfounded Shu Tao, and left with him through the side door. The young man's eyes lit up, and he quickly left the palace. The youth walked straight to the central palace. When he was outside of the doors, he heard bursts of song and music along with his father's laughter coming from inside. Outside the hall stood rows of guards. When they saw the prince, they all dropped to one knee. The young man quickly walked past them and into the main hall. Inside the hall were 2 small tables with a cultivator sitting behind each one. The cultivators were wearing different colored robes, one black and one green. The cultivator in black's eyes remained closed. He had no interest in music and dance. The green-robed cultivator was smiling as he watched the singers and dancers perform. Above the main hall sat a very handsome middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was very majestic and had the look of a ruler. After the young man entered the hall, the middle-aged man laughed and said, "Why are you not having fun in the Pink Palace? Why did you come here to your old man?" The young man first respectfully greeted the 2 cultivators, then looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Father, please look at this." With that, he took out the dragon carving and placed it on the ground. At that moment, the green-robed cultivator, who was looking at the performers, suddenly locked his gaze on the carving. The middle-aged man's eyes also lit up. He waved his hand, and all of the performers quickly scattered and left. The green-robed cultivator suddenly stood up and walked up to the wood carving. He carefully looked at the carving, took a deep breath, and said, "This is." He already had a guess in his heart, but he wasn't too sure. The black-robed man, who always had his eyes closed, opened his eyes and slowly said, "This is a wood carving." The green-robed man before the wood carving was startled. He then wryly smiled and said, "Senior apprentice brother, I know that this is a wood carving. I am referring to what this is a carving of." The black-robed cultivator that was addressed as senior apprentice brother pondered for a bit and slowly said, "I have not seen it before." The green-robed cultivator bitterly smiled. He was used to this senior apprentice brother's strangeness. The middle-aged man stared at the wood carving and smiled. "2 immortal elders, is there anything special about this carving?" The green-robed cultivator near the wood carving grabbed the wood carving. He suddenly felt an ancient aura come at him. This aura was very powerful and caused him to be shocked. With his mid-stage foundation establishment cultivation, he felt as if his foundation was about to collapse. Horrified, he quickly let go of the carving. His senior apprentice brother waved his sleeves, and the carving flew into his hand. This cultivator's face suddenly turned pale as his core became unstable. It took a long time before he was able to control the fluctuations in his core again. The higher the cultivation level you have, the more affected you would be by Wang Lin's carving. But if you were immortal, then the effect would be small. The black-robed man slowly said, "This object is not a normal carving. The creature that is carved is almost exactly the same as the dragon in the ancient record of our sect." The green-robed cultivator said, with a strange expression, "Senior apprentice brother, didn't you say earlier that you've never seen it before? How come you are saying it is a dragon now?" The black-robed cultivator looked surprisedly at the green-robed cultivator. His eyes were filled with astonishment as he said, "Junior apprentice brother, I finally understand why your cultivation hasn't had a breakthrough yet." The green-robed cultivator's face twitched. He didn't say anything. The black-robed cultivator sighed and said, "I have never seen the beast that is carved, but I never said I didn't recognize what it was." The green-robed cultivator's heart wasn't stable enough, so he coughed out a mouthful of blood. After a long time, he calmed himself and bitterly laughed. He felt like he really couldn't deal with this senior apprentice brother of his at all. The end of the month is here. Wishing for the like button for the video. Brothers, do you still have likes for the video? You are listening to a completely free audiobook on the Leo Audio YouTube channel. If you enjoy the story, please like the video to motivate the channel. Support Leo with a cup of coffee through the description link or on the screen. If you want to hear any other stories, just comment and let Leo know. Thank you very much for watching the video. Chapter 255, Robber. It was night, and there was no moon. Wang Lin lied on the bed in the back of the store. There was a jug of wine beside him. He picked up the jug and took a drink. Wang Lin could feel that, in this past year, he has managed to get rid of his mentality as a cultivator and has become more like a mortal. Take this for example. He rarely cultivates at all now, but that would have been impossible before. In those 400 years of escaping and killing, he almost always had his spiritual energy surging in his body, and would use any spare time he could find to raise his cultivation level. His life was filled with deadly schemes and life-threatening dangers. If he was a bit less careful, he would have died. He had never before lied down like this and slept. He spent most nights cultivating. That type of life was very exciting and filled with passion, but it was filled with regret. It had no balance. That life was missing something. Now, there were no conflicts in Wang Lin's life. Although it was a bit boring, it was cleansing Wang Lin's soul. Wang Lin felt very strange when he first noticed this feeling, but he gradually accepted it and continued living the life of a mortal. He picked up the jug and downed a gulp. Then, he suddenly frowned. At that moment, two cultivators arrived outside his store. Their two bodies floated toward his shop like ghosts. One of them waved his hand and Wang Lin's store's main door silently opened. The two of them quickly entered. The door was closed by the wind. Inside the shop, the two SIs lit up as they looked at all of the carvings inside the shop. Their eyes were filled with terror, but that terror was soon replaced with endless greed. There are so many magic treasures. One of the cultivators sucked in a cold breath of air. He grabbed one of the carvings and looked at it. His body trembled and he quickly threw the carving away. The greed inside his eyes became even stronger. He waved his hand and all of the carvings on the shelves entered his bag of holding. The other cultivator squatted down and searched through a box in the corner. Then, he let out a shout as he held an incomplete carving. His expression became strange as he felt a sweetness in his throat and coughed out a mouthful of blood. He quickly threw away the carving in his hand and backed up as if the carving was an ancient beast. In fact, it was no surprise he couldn't withstand the carving. This was an incomplete carving of Sixth Desire Devil Lord. Although it was incomplete, the spiritual pressure inside the carving was that of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. With this person's core formation cultivation, there was no way he could withstand it. Good thing he quickly let go and the spiritual pressure of the carving hadn't truly awakened. He wouldn't have lost only a simple mouthful of blood otherwise. As the wood carving fell, it was caught by a giant invisible hand which placed it in Wang Lin's hand. Wang Lin walked out of the back room. He casually put the carving on a shelf, then took a gulp of wine and said, "That is a total of 4,520 gold. Pay up." When Wang Lin appeared, the two suddenly stopped and stared at Wang Lin with horrified expressions. In particular, the cultivator that was just injured by the spiritual pressure in the carving. His face was pale, and his forehead was covered in sweat. In their eyes, Wang Lin's appearance was too strange. Before the two of them entered the shop, they used their spiritual energy to check the inside. Although there was one person in the back room, it was only a mortal. But now, the mortal in their eyes appeared silently before them. It was as if a bolt of lightning had just struck them, causing them to be terrified. Adding to the wood carving magic treasures, even if the two of them were dumb, they would have realized that the person before them was a senior they couldn't afford to mess with. The two of them looked at each other and respectfully said, "Greetings, senior. Juniors are disciples of the White Cloud sect. Juniors have been rude and hope senior will forgive us." Wang Lin plainly asked, "Do you have 4,520 pieces of gold?" The two of them looked at each other. They were cultivators, so if it was spirit stones, they would have some, but they really didn't have much gold used by mortals right now. Of course, if they were given time to prepare, they would be able to prepare 4,000, or even 40,000. Wang Lin realized what the two were thinking, and sighed. He waved his hand, and the bag of holding containing the carvings flew into his hand. He casually swiped his hand across the bag of holding, and the owner of the bag forcibly swallowed a mouthful of blood. The respect in the cultivator's eyes became even deeper as that swipe wiped out his divine sense from the bag. Wang Lin shook the bag and all of the carvings flew back to their original places without any error. It was as if they were never moved in the first place. "Go back. When you come again, bring enough gold." With that, Wang Lin waved his hand and the bag of holding flew back to the cultivator. Then, the two of them were pushed by a powerful force toward the door. When they were about to hit the door opened, and the two of them were pushed out of the store. This one pushed them more than 10 kilometers before they finally stabilized themselves. Their eyes revealed unimaginable horror and shock. In their eyes, That youth's cultivation was too powerful for them to measure. The two pondered a little and thought themselves to be very lucky. With that, they quickly left. These two cultivators were the two from the palace. They noticed the abnormality in the carving, so they went and found Shu Tao, who was enjoying himself, and found out about this store. But after what just happened, they were simply too scared to have any more ideas about that store. The two of them didn't know that Wang Lin had already left his divine sense on them. If they had any malicious thoughts about Wang Lin, they would be killed immediately. In fact, if the two of them knew about Wang Lin, then they would feel extremely lucky. If it was the Wang Lin from 1 year ago, the only result of that situation would be death. Wang Lin sat inside the store. He drank a gulp of wine and sighed. I haven't killed anyone in a year. With that, he walked back to the back room and went to sleep. Time quickly passed and 2 years passed by. This was already the 3rd year that Wang Lin had been at the capital. Daniu grew even taller and sturdier, and more neighbors moved in. The Kong fabric shop's owner died due to illness, and the shop was sold to someone else. Daniu's parents' faces gained some light wrinkles. Although they were still young, they couldn't avoid the passage of time. It is worth mentioning that during these 2 years, many of the neighbors had come to Wang Lin to talk about marriage, but they were rejected by Wang Lin each time. The Shu family's second son had already gotten married and had a healthy baby. Shu Tao came back to pay his respects to Wang Lin. He gave Wang Lin 100 pieces of gold, saying it was from the prince. Actually, in these 2 years, during each new year, Shu Tao would bring a lot of gold and silver. As for this matter, Wang Lin didn't reject him. He accepted it all. Autumn passed and winter came. The sun came and went. During these past 2 years, Wang Lin saw the birth of the young and the death of the old. He felt very wistful. In these 2 years, he had only cultivated twice. He no longer cared about his cultivation level and rarely checked it anymore. As for the red substance, only a thin layer remained. The rest had been condensed into 3 red beads, which were stored in his bag of holding. According to his analysis, when the 4th bead is created, the red substance will be all gone. The 2 cultivators from back then had only come once in these 2 years. After handing over a large amount of mortal gold, they took 3 wood carvings. In these 2 years, Wang Lin's store had gained some fame in the western part of the city. Although there weren't a lot of customers, it was still much better than his first year. However, the most common visitors to Wang Lin's shop weren't mortals, but cultivators. 6 out of 10 people that came would be a cultivator. Every cultivator that came would buy wood carvings with mortal gold. In these 2 years, he sold quite a few wood carvings and had gathered a lot of gold and silver. The fact that there was someone amazing in the western part of the capital gradually gained some fame among cultivators. Wang Lin's heart was still calm. What he wanted was still to experience the life of a mortal. The store was just a tool to experience it, and the wood carvings were the same. It was about to be a new year, and the capital had become very lively. Wang Lin walked out of his store and sat down outside. His eyes were filled with longing. This was the 3rd new year he had experienced since he arrived at the capital. Each time, this experience was different, except for one thing, the regret he felt toward his childhood. Daniu ran out from the ironworks shop from across the street with fireworks in his hand and happily played with them. Upon seeing Daniu, happiness appeared in Wang Lin's eyes. Wang Lin had watched this kid grow up from an 11-year-old kid to a 14-year-old youth. Last year, Daniu was unable to refuse his dad anymore and began to learn ironworks. However, whenever he had time, he would come and watch Wang Lin make wood carvings. Although Daniu didn't come as often, the 1 jug of fruit wine a day never stopped. Playing with the fireworks, Daniu ran toward Wang Lin and sat down on the cold bench. He didn't seem to mind the cold. He winked at Wang Lin and said, "Uncle Wang, I heard from my dad a few days ago that shopkeeper Lu from the east side of the city wanted to marry his daughter to you. Why didn't you agree? I have secretly seen her before and she is very beautiful." Wang Lin smiled. He rubbed Daniu's head and said, "Uncle already has a wife." "Oh, really? How come I have never seen her?" Daniu suddenly stood up. His face was filled with shock. "She is in a very far-away place, waiting for me. One day I'll go and find her." Wang Lin's voice was gentle as the image of a woman appeared in his mind. Daniu let out a mischievous smile. He said, "I understand. Uncle Wang, you came to the capital to make money so you can go back home to get married." The end of the month, wishing for the like button for the video. Don't hold back, it's expiring. Chapter Coldness. Wang Lin smiled and said, "That's right. Once uncle has made a lot of money, he will go back and get married." Daniel was about to speak when his father called him. Daniel responded and said to Wang Lin with a bitter smile, "I have to do ironworks again." With that, he helplessly returned home. From inside the ironworks shop came a few shouts from Daniel's father. Wang Lin took a sip of the wine and continued to sit outside. Slowly, snow began to fall, and this year's first snow silently appeared. The temperature suddenly dropped. The snowflakes hit Wang Lin's face and quickly turned into ice water. Wang Lin raised his head and looked at the dim sky. He raised his hand and casually closed it. All of the snowflakes started to gather toward him. Wang Lin took a deep breath and released his right hand. The snowflakes immediately scattered and drifted in all directions. This happened so quickly that none of the mortals noticed it as they quickly walked through the streets with their heads down. As the sky darkened, there were less and less people walking around. Soon, there was no one left on the street, even all the shops had closed down due to the cold. Everyone had gone home to their families to gather around the stove. This type of warmth, besides the physical warmth, also warmed the soul. This type of warmth from being with the family could expel any coldness. Slowly, sadness filled Wang Lin's eyes. The coldness that the snow brought was really nothing to him but at this moment. When he looked at all of the lights coming from the shops and his shop being the only one dark one, a sliver of coldness appeared in his heart. This coldness wasn't anything a fire or technique could help get rid of. This type of coldness came from comprehending the heavens and was a must to experience life. In order to turn into an immortal, one must first turn into a mortal. Although it was easy to turn into mortal, how could it be that easy? Right now, Wang Lin was experiencing loneliness. He knew that he needed to keep experiencing it. This loneliness was nothing compared to years later, when everyone he knows dies one by one until he is the only one left. That is true loneliness. Wang Lin began to ponder. After a long time, he stood up. It seemed as if he had just aged a lot. He slowly picked up the chair, went back into the shop, and slowly closed the door. After a long time, a fire lit up inside the shop. Although this fire looked like all the other shop's fires, this one was hollow, and a deep sense of loneliness hid inside it. Wang Lin sat next to the fire. It was very warm inside the shop, but his heart became even colder. After pondering for a long time, Wang Lin took out a wood carving and put it beside him. This was a carving of his father. Looking at the carving, the coldness in Wang Lin's heart lessened a bit. He then took out the carving of his mother. Then, he gradually took out carvings one by one and placed them near the fireplace. There were carvings of males and females, young people and old people. All of them were residents of the small village. Looking at these carvings, Wang Lin let out a smile. Although this smile was filled with satisfaction, if anyone were to see the smile, they would have said, "How is that a smile?" It is clearly a silent cry. The fire flickered, sometimes lighting Wang Lin's face, sometimes making it dim. When the light reached the wood carvings, they gave off a strange feeling. He gently grabbed each carving as the coldness lessened in his heart. Although the coldness lessened, his sadness grew. Wang Lin muttered to himself, "Can't he let it go? Can't he let it go?" In his early years of cultivation, he couldn't let go of his family. Even now, he still couldn't let them go. But this type of feeling was different from back then. In order to turn into an immortal, he first must turn into a mortal. If he had let go of all of his emotions toward his family, then there would be no way for him to turn into a mortal. Every soul formation cultivator was strong not only because of their cultivation, but also because their hearts hid a tiny bit of emotion deep down. They used this bit of emotion to break through the nascent soul stage and reach the soul formation stage. It was because of this emotion that Wang Lin didn't meet with any difficulty turning into a mortal, and gradually began to feel like a mortal. At the moment, he was immersed in thoughts about his parents, and silently experiencing this feeling. The spiritual energy in his body started to wildly surge again. This spiritual energy gradually came out of his body. Slivers of spiritual energy came out from all of the wood carvings in the room and swirled along with Wang Lin's spiritual energy. Gradually, the swirl of spiritual energy spun even faster and expanded to outside the shop. When the snowflakes fell on the roof of the shop, they began to swirl as well. They soon turned into swirls of snowflakes and flew off into the distance. The snow started to come down harder and harder. Gradually Wang Lin began to awaken, and when he awakened, a crack had appeared on some of the wood carvings. Although these wood carvings gained a crack, their spiritual pressure became even stronger. Even their quality increased. Wang Lin took a look and took a deep breath. He stood up, then pushed open the door. A cold wind mixed with snow hit his face. He looked up into the sky and whispered, "Soul formation, I, Wang Lin, will obtain it, no matter what." The snow started to fall even harder, and a thick layer of snow started to gather on the ground. At this moment, the door to the ironworks shop opposite of Wang Lin suddenly opened. Daniu and his father were about to leave when they saw Wang Lin standing there. They couldn't help but be startled. Daniu ran through the snow, making crunching sounds with each step. He arrived next to Wang Lin and shouted, "Uncle Wang, did you know we were going to come?" With that, he entered the room and sat next to the fire. Daniu's father carried a wooden basket and smiled, "Brother Wang, you are not busy." Wang Lin faintly smiled as he moved aside and said, "I'm not busy. Come and talk inside." Daniu's father entered the room. He looked at the carvings in the room and revealed a look of envy. He placed the wooden basket on the ground, then rubbed his hands. He wanted to say something, but didn't know how to start. At that moment, Daniu, who was next to the fire, saw the carvings of Wang Lin's parents and suddenly shouted, "Uncle Wang, how come I have never seen these carvings before? Did you make them recently?" Wang Lin closed the door. He then sat down and said, "I made them a while ago." Daniu carefully looked at the wood carvings and asked, "Uncle Wang, who are these carvings of?" Wang Lin's eyes revealed a look of nostalgia and slowly said, "They are my family." Daniu was startled and no longer kept asking. He walked to the basket and opened it up. Inside were 3 plates of exquisite dishes and 2 jugs of fruit wine. Wang Lin took a look and let out a faint smile as he looked at Daniu's father. He had known this man for a long time, and this was the first time Wang Lin had seen him like this. Clearly, Daniu's father had come to ask for his help, but didn't he know how to ask? Wang Lin said, "Brother Sang, if you have anything to say, just say it." Daniu's father hesitated for a bit. He rubbed his hands and awkwardly said, "Nothing, nothing." Daniu looked at the dishes in the basket. He swallowed hard and his hand reached in. When he noticed his father giving him the look, he quickly pulled his hand back out and disgruntledly said, "It is only borrowing some silver. What's so embarrassing about it?" Daniu's father's face suddenly turned red and he scolded his son. "Little brat, wait until we are home." Daniu stuck out his tongue and said, "Since father won't say it, I'll say it. Mother wants to buy the shop next to ours to make our shop bigger, but doesn't have enough money." Daniu's father let out a sigh. He looked at Wang Lin and helplessly said, "Brother Wang, your sister-in-law thinks our shop is too small and limits the business we can do. She saw that old lease shop is for rent, so she wanted to immediately rent it." Wang Lin faintly nodded. He picked up the jug of wine from the basket and drank a gulp, then said, "How much do you need?" Daniu's father hesitated for a while and said, "The shop is pretty big and we have to pay 2 years' rent at once, so it would be 50 pieces of silver 30 pieces of silver is enough." Daniu pouted and whispered. Mother clearly said 80 pieces of silver before he could finish. His father shot him another vicious stare. Wang Lin nodded. Without a word, he stood up and walked into the back room. There was a basket there filled with gold and silver. Wang Lin casually picked up some gold and placed it before Daniu's father. When Daniu's father saw the piece of gold, he was startled and quickly said, "I don't need this much." "Brother Wang, quickly take it back. I only want to borrow 30 pieces of silver." From his point of view, there were at least 10 pieces of gold in front of him, far more than he needed. Wang Lin picked up the jug of wine and smiled, brother, saying, "I'm not lending you this money. This is money for wine. From now on, I'd like to buy a jug of your fruit wine every day. That money for 10 years of fruit wine is worth it." Daniu's father hesitated for a bit. His face revealed an excited expression. He said, "Brother Wang, this." Daniu rolled his eyes and said, "Dad, just take it. Uncle Wang can sell 1 wood carving for 10 pieces of gold." Daniu's father stared at Daniu again. He picked up the jug, took a large gulp, then said, "Brother Wang, what is 10 years or 8 years? As long as you live here, I'll send you a jug of wine every day." Wang Lin chuckled. Looking at the father and son before him, his heart was no longer cold. He now felt a tiny bit of warmth. That night, Daniu's father drank a lot. 2 jugs were clearly not enough. Daniu served them on the side, and it wasn't tea until the 10th jug that they had drank enough. Finally, Daniu's father passed out from drinking, but his hand tightly held onto the gold as he was being carried back by Daniu. Before they left, Daniu quietly said to Wang Lin, "Uncle Wang, we have a lot of this wine. My dad won tea, let me tell other people, but in truth, there are many large pots of wine in the basement of our house, and it is said that there are even more buried deep down. If it wasn't tea for the fact that father refuses to sell the wine, mother wouldn't tea have made him come here to borrow money." A grand chapter. Not caring to read 4,500 words, can tea bear to split it into 2 chapters? As the donkey dies a martyr, tears flow, wishing for the like button for the video. Chapter 257. It's you. After sending off Daniu and his father, Wang Lin sat down next to the fire and suddenly felt very regretful. 10 pieces of gold was a large amount of wealth for mortals, but to immortals, it was like dirt that they wouldn't even bother to acknowledge. He quietly sat inside the shop, picked up a piece of wood, and his hand began to move as he started to carve again. Time passed and another 3 years went by. Daniu's shop's size had almost doubled in size, and, as his mother thought, their business did get better. However, as business got better, Daniu had less free time as he had to do ironworks with his father. Only after the shop closed would Daniu drag his tired body along with a jug of fruit wine to come and watch Wang Lin carve. Daniu's body, perhaps due to all the ironworks he had done, had become even more sturdy. The 17-year-old young man didn't feel cold at all while only wearing a thin shirt. However, the wrinkles on his parents had gradually increased. Wang Lin's appearance was also different from 6 years ago. He no longer looked like a young man, but a middle-aged man as wrinkles appeared on his face. This was deliberately caused by Wang Lin himself. After all, if someone didn't change at all in 6 years, then it would be a very incredible thing for these good and honest neighbors. In the past 3 years, Shu Tao began to come even more often. He would come every month with gold, silver, and the intent of drawing Wang Lin to their side. And every time he would point out that this was all given by the prince to pay respects to Wang Lin. Wang Lin didn't have any interest in this prince. He came to the capital with only one purpose, and that was to experience mortal life so he could have a breakthrough in his cultivation. Considering his cultivation level, he was too lazy to get involved with mortals' power struggle. In the late autumn of this year, wind blew the leaves off the willow trees on the street, causing the leaves to fly far away and making them leave their branches. One could see leaves all over the street. Wang Lin casually walked out of the shop wearing thick clothes and a leather hat. If at this time, anyone from Zhao or Chu were to show up here, they wouldn't be able to recognize Wang Lin at all. This person was Wang Lin, who had stirred up the entire country, killing thousands, and whose hands were stained with blood. Even the cultivators that had fought him wouldn't be able to recognize him. The current him looked no different from a mortal. This applied only to his appearance. It was his spirit too. Even deep down in his bones, he was the same as a mortal. After 6 years of transforming into a mortal, he had completely become a mortal. The current him looked a bit old. Although his back was still straight, he looked no different from any other middle-aged man on the street. The only little thing that made him different from mortals were his eyes. There was a clear distinction between black and white in his eyes, plus a hint of light, making him seem unlike a mortal. In the last 3 years, Wang Lin didn't cultivate once, and the last of the red substance had been unwittingly completely condensed by him into a bead, which was put away in his bag of holding. He opened the shop door and the chilling autumn wind blew into his face. Wang Lin tightened his collar, closed the shop's door, and walked into the distance. At this moment, a rather sturdy young man walked out of the shop across the street. He was carrying a bucket of broken charcoal. After he came out of the shop, he saw Wang Lin and smiled. "Uncle Wang, are you going to that show again?" Wang Lin turned around and smiled. "Then you bring me a jug of wine." The young man nodded. He quickly threw the charcoal to the side and walked into the shop. Shortly after, he ran out with a jug of wine. His eyes were filled with care as he said, "Uncle Wang, at your age, you shouldn't drink as much. Just drink a little to warm your body." Wang Lin nodded with a smile. He patted Daniu's shoulder, then turned around and left. Daniu felt bitterness in his heart as he looked at Wang Lin's back. In these 6 years, the omnipotent Uncle Wang had aged a lot. He still remembered the Uncle Wang from 6 years ago, who was filled with vigor and whose eyes shined like the stars. One by one, lifelike wood carvings would take shape in his hands. He still remembered when Uncle Wang said that once he makes it big, he will go back and marry his wife. However, in these past 6 years, Daniel had never seen Uncle Wang's wife, so he never asked about it again. Daniel let out a sigh and returned to the shop. He had also grown older, so he was now the main worker in the ironwork shop. Even after the shop had closed, there were many things he had to do. The habit he had of watching Wang Lin carve every day couldn't continue any longer. Every few days, he would find some time to accompany this lonely Uncle Wang. There was a chill hidden in the late autumn wind. Wang Lin slowly walked forward. After a while, he arrived at an inn at the corner of the street. Just as he entered, the waiter, a very bright boy with a towel over his shoulders, said, "If it isn't shopkeeper Wang, please come in." After Wang Lin entered the room, he took off his hat and smiled. "I don't have any silver to give you as a tip. No matter how friendly you are, it won't help." The waiter let out a smile and said, "Look at what you were saying. The shopkeeper already said that the first seat by the east window is reserved for you." With that, he quickly walked a few steps toward a table. He wiped it with the towel that was on his shoulder and bowed before leaving. Wang Lin sat down at the table. Soon, the waiter brought a few dishes and a small charcoal stove with a pot of boiling water on top. Wang Lin placed the jug of wine in the pot of water to start warming it. Occasionally, he poured himself a cup to drink. He just sat there, watching people enter the inn. Gradually, more and more people entered the inn. After about 30 minutes, performers came out from the back of the inn and the guests all started cheering. Among the actors, there was a female that looked very pretty. Most of the guests in the inn were here to watch her. This woman's eyes were very beautiful. Her long sleeves danced as she began to sing. The woman's voice was very attractive, causing all the customers in the inn to shout in praise. At this moment, the mood reached its climax. Wang Lin smiled as he watched the woman sing. He had been spending his days like this for more than a year. Not long after, a fat, middle-aged man wearing thick clothes came out from the back and sat at the same table as Wang Lin. When he arrived, the waiter quickly brought out wine for him. The middle-aged fat man quickly poured a cup and drank it. He looked at Wang Lin and said, "Shopkeeper Wang, this." Wang Lin picked up the wine jug. He took a sip and said, "Shopkeeper Li, I'm not here today to collect rent so you can relax." The middle-aged fat man smiled and said, "Business is not good lately. Having a lot of customers today doesn't mean much. I just spent a lot of money hiring this group to perform here. This business is not easy." Wang Lin smiled. He didn't say a word. He only quietly watched the performance. This fat man was named Li, but as for his first name, Wang Lin still didn't know it. 2 years ago, this guy came to Wang Lin and pledged his shop to borrow 20 pieces of gold from Wang Lin. To this day, he still hadn't paid Wang Lin back, so this shop now belonged to Wang Lin. In this past year, he saw Wang Lin come in every day. This made him feel very nervous, so he often came to check on Wang Lin's intentions. As the pretty actress's eyes scanned the crowd, all of the guests cheered. Just at that moment, a very perverted voice outside the inn said, "Hey, this little darling sure sings well. She lured me here from the northern part of the city." After that was said, an old man wearing a gray robe walked in. This old man's hair was a mess, his face was covered in bruises, and there was a large footprint on his chest. The moment he walked in, he started shouting. The waiter frowned and said, "Where did this beggar come from? There is no money for you today." With that, he walked up to push the beggar away. The old man stared at him and said, "You dare to touch me? If you touch me, then I'll lie down here and not get up today. I am here to listen to the music." When Wang Lin saw the old man, the light that hadn't shone in his eyes for years suddenly lit up. This old man wasn't just anyone. It was the old man that cheated a meal from him 6 or 7 years ago. The shopkeeper of the inn, who was sitting next to Wang Lin, walked up. He rummaged through his pockets for a bronze coin. He tossed the coin at the old man and said, "I gave you money, now leave. You are ruining the mood." The old man picked up the coin and bit it. He smiled at the waiter and said, "It's real. Harder than gold. See, your shopkeeper knows what to do." With that, he threw the coin into the waiter's hand and said, "A pot of tea." Then, his eyes swept the area. His gaze landed on Wang Lin and he walked over. It was not that he recognized Wang Lin, but that the only available seat in the inn was next to Wang Lin. The waiter was shocked. He looked at the bronze coin and then at the shopkeeper. He had seen a lot of beggars, but this was the first time he had seen a beggar that would bite a bronze coin and then use it to buy tea. The middle-aged fat man's face twitched. He pulled up his sleeves and was about to throw the old man out when Wang Lin raised his hand and said, "Forget it." The middle-aged fat man immediately paused. He hesitated for a bit, muttered a few words, turned around and went into the back room. The old man let out a mischievous smile. He looked at Wang Lin and said, "You." Just as he said that word, he was suddenly startled and stared at Wang Lin. He carefully looked at Wang Lin, and a strange expression appeared on his face as he said, "It's you." Big brothers and little sisters, do you still have likes for the video? Wishing for the like button for the video to help. Chapter 258, Trashing Sex. Wang Lin faintly smiled and said, "Senior, we haven't tea meat in 7 years and you are still the same." The strange expression on the old man's face became even stranger. He stared at Wang Lin for a long time before letting out a sigh. There was a hint of praise in his eyes as he said, "You turned into a mortal, you really turned into a mortal." Wang Lin picked up the jug from the stove, poured a cup, drank it, and said, "Junior is only struggling in the mortal. How could I be as relaxed as Senior, who is enjoying playing in the mortal world?" The old man took a deep breath. He took the wine jug, poured a cup, and said, "I have seen many spirit-forming cultivators, but you are the first to be able to turn into a mortal in 6 years." Wang Lin didn't speak. His heart didn't waver as he let out a faint smile and watched the performance. The old man stared at Wang Lin. After a long time, the praise in his eyes became even stronger. "It is not that the flesh and blood is similar, but the soul is. Young man, if you can experience a domain, then I can promise that you will reach the soul formation stage within 100 years, said the old man. Wang Lin turned his head, took a drink, and asked, "What is domain?" The old man was about to speak when his eyes suddenly turned. He said, "Look, I am already old. When I get hungry, I can remember anything." Wang Lin seriously looked at the old man and smiled. "Senior, you can take your time enjoying the performance. Junior will leave first." With that, he stood up and left the inn. The old man was startled. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he muttered, "Interesting." Wang Lin carried the jug and slowly walked down the street while stepping on leaves. He returned to the shop, opened the door, and walked in. After he took one step inside, he heard the old man's voice say, "Not bad. So you spent 6 years turning into a mortal here." The old man mysteriously appeared behind Wang Lin and entered the shop with him. He looked around and his eyes gradually revealed a look of surprise. Wang Lin wasn't surprised at the expression the old man made. He sat down and continued drinking wine while watching the old man. Dragon, flame spider, heaven noise beasts, Zhonggu, 8-claw blade beasts, Thailand Teskesk. Not bad, young man. You managed to bring most of the beasts from the Sea of Devils here. The more the old man looked, the more surprised his expression became. Finally, his gaze landed on a wooden box in the corner of the room. He waved his hand and all of the carvings inside that box flew out one by one. These carvings were all incomplete products. The moment the old man saw these incomplete products, his eyes became serious. He carefully looked at each one before taking a deep breath. He then looked at Wang Lin and slowly said, "I really underestimated you. I never would have thought you have had such experiences. You wouldn't have been able to make these carvings of soul formation cultivators or desolate beasts unless you have personally fought them." Wang Lin faintly smiled. He didn't say anything. He only quietly drank his wine. It was as if what the old man said had nothing to do with him. After pondering for a while, the old man put down the carving he was holding. He turned toward Wang Lin and asked, "What is your name?" Wang Lin blandly answered, "Wang Lin." The old man nodded. He waved his right hand and his aura completely changed from an old man's to someone with a very commanding presence. Although his appearance hadn't changed at all, and there was no spiritual energy coming from his body, he suddenly became very mysterious and hard to see through. The spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body moved due to the stimulation and his eyes lit up. At that moment, Wang Lin couldn't see through this old man's cultivation. The light quickly disappeared from his eyes as he took a sip of wine and said, "Senior, my old house really can withstand your power. Please restrain yourself." The old man snorted. "Kid, experience it for a bit. This is a domain." With that, the aura around him suddenly moved, and a sense of rage surged through the shop. What was odd was that not a single tile of the building was damaged, and none of the aura left the room. At that moment, the inside and outside of the shop were like two worlds cut off from each other. This aura of rage spread into the surroundings, and Wang Lin's spiritual energy involuntarily started to resist this aura. As soon as his spiritual energy started to move, it was pulled by this raging aura. It was instantly assimilated by the raging aura and became very violent as well. Under this raging aura, a trace of terror appeared in Wang Lin's eyes. The spiritual energy inside his body no longer listened to him. He even had a feeling that his own nascent soul had been assimilated by this raging aura. At that moment, it felt as if his 400 years of hard work had become a tool for the old man to attack him with. This is my raging domain. I used this domain back then to reach the soul formation stage. Under this domain, all spiritual energy is assimilated by my domain and is controlled by me. There was a sliver of madness inside the old man's voice. After he glanced at Wang Lin, the domain disappeared. It was as if the domain had never been there at all. In these short few breaths, Wang Lin became covered in cold sweat. His hands were still shaking as he grabbed the jug and took a big gulp of wine. It took a long time before the spiritual energy in his body settled down. Wang Lin pondered for a while, then asked, "Why have none of the soul formation cultivators I met before displayed this kind of domain?" The old man was startled. He scratched his head and embarrassingly said, "This I forgot. Also, I lowered my cultivation level to soul formation, but still used the soul transformation stage to activate the domain, so it was a little too powerful. In truth, soul formation cultivators aren't able to display their domain like that, because only a sliver of their domains are present in their techniques, so their domains are not detectable." "Hey, sorry." Wang Lin wryly smiled and looked at the old man. He muttered to himself, "Domain, this is domain." The old man's eyes turned. He revealed a shifty look on his face and whispered, "Turning into a mortal to experience your own domain, and using that domain to break past the nascent soul stage into the soul formation stage. This is something every cultivator must experience when they wish to break past the nascent soul stage. Kid, do you want to experience other people's domains? This is very beneficial to you." Wang Lin's eyes lit up. It has to be said that although experiencing other soul formation cultivators' domains was very dangerous, the benefit was very large. He looked at the old man. He didn't immediately agree. He slowly asked, "What price do I need to pay?" The old man's eyes narrowed. He hit his chest and said, "Price? There is no price that needs to be paid. With me around to protect you in this rank cultivation country, we can walk sideways and it would be fine." Wang Lin didn't say a word, but silently looked at the old man. Gradually, the old man scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "This, I can tell that these carvings are pretty good, this." Wang Lin decisively said, "Okay, I can give all of these to you." The old man rolled his eyes. He angrily hit his chest and said, "What would I want your low-quality magic treasures for? Only those half-finished carvings are worth looking at, but I have no use for them. So, let me say it directly. Look at how handsome, bright, and dominating I am. Does your heart not move? Don't you think I make a very good model for a carving?" When the old man started speaking, his face was a little red, but the more he spoke, the more excited he became. He even puffed out his chest and hit it. Wang Lin was startled. He nodded and said, "Okay, but my cultivation level is currently not high enough. Only after I reach the soul formation stage can I make your carving perfect." The old man immediately became happy and quickly said, "There is no rush, there is no rush. You must make it perfect. Oh, I want new to carving, so you must make my carving perfect. That's it. Gotta make more than one. 100! Yes, 100! The old man was immersed in his fantasy. He thought that the next time he goes to the brothel or meets a beautiful woman, he would give them a carving of himself and then they would remember him for the rest of their lives. He especially thought of all the beautiful women holding a carving of himself. He became very excited at all these beautiful images in his mind. The more he looked at Wang Lin, the more pleased he became. He grabbed toward Wang Lin and moved. In the blink of an eye, the two of them disappeared from the shop. When they reappeared, they were already in the clouds, 100,000 plus kilometers away from the capital. Wang Lin spread out his divine sense and was terrified in his heart. He estimated that they had traveled 100,000 kilometers. This power was too terrifying. It caused the hairs on his body to stand up. It has to be said that late-stage nascent soul cultivators can only teleport 1,000 kilometers away. Although he didn't know how far late-stage soul formation cultivations could teleport, it couldn't possibly be 100,000 kilometers. Under Wang Lin's analysis, not even soul transformation cultivators could easily teleport this far. More importantly, this old man carried him as well. As a result, Wang Lin dreaded this old man even more. The old man was currently panting. Even for him, traveling 100,000 kilometers was not an easy task. However, when he saw Wang Lin's shocked face, he proudly raised his chin, pretending to be regretful, and said, "Alas, I am old and my body is a lot worse than it used to be. This teleportation only moved us a mere 100,000 kilometers. I am ashamed." Although the old man said this, even a mortal passing by could be seen the intense pride on his face. Wang Lin silently pondered. After a long time, the old man was still panting heavily. The pride on his face gradually disappeared as he angrily asked, "Kid, have you seen anyone teleport this distance before?" Wang Lin calmly said, "Never. After seeing how powerful I am, you don't even let out a fart." The old man's eyes widened. It was like he used all his strength to drink milk in a brothel, and this kid had no reaction at all. Wang Lin looked at the old man with a strange expression and said, "Senior's cultivation is something Junior has never seen before. I admire you." The old man snorted and boasted, "If there is an opportunity, I'll give you a chance to experience a 1,000,000 kilometer teleportation." With that, he pointed at the air in the distance and said, "That is the White Cloud sect. Let us go. This old man will take you to go trash that sect." Just in time to keep the manuscript, tonight's update might not be timely. If there's no second watch tonight, Leo will supplement tomorrow. However, Leo will try his best to finish today. Chapter 25, QI Condensation. Time had flown by while he was in the Xianxia sect. Wang Lin had been cultivating in the dream space for the past 2 months. He had thoroughly studied the capabilities of the stone bead. The dream space could be entered 3 times a day. Each time was about 50 hours, adding up to about 6 days. 2 months had passed in the real world, but he had cultivated for a whole year. Wang Lin couldn't feel it before, but cultivating was a very boring and dry process. With the help of the spiritual energy spring water, he didn't need to eat all. All he did every day was cultivate. He repeated the 1 long 3 short breathing technique as the spiritual energy entered his body. If it wasn't for his parents' looks of hope that kept popping up in his mind, he believed that he wouldn't be able to stand this tedious cultivation, especially when he thought about how Wang Zhuo was able to reach the first layer of QI condensation in 3 months. Wang Lin would always feel dissatisfaction in his heart. He almost never left his house. He was completely devoted to his cultivation. Wang Lin was the joke of the Xianxia sect. Although there were many people who made fun of him, only a few paid any attention to him. Sun Dazhu had almost forgotten about Wang Lin. Every time he thought of Wang Lin, he would become furious and do his best to filter those thoughts out of his mind. Thanks to all these factors, and with Wang Lin hiding his precious stone bead in his clothes before he fell asleep, these last 2 months had passed by peacefully, without anyone finding out about his stone bead. In those 2 months, the amount of times Wang Lin had consumed the spring water couldn't be counted anymore. Basically, anytime he felt he was lacking spiritual energy in his body, he would drink a few big gulps. If Sun Dazhu knew of this, his heart would be filled with pain. He would likely kill this disciple with 1 slap. In the entire cultivation community in the country of Zhao, who else could cultivate like Wang Lin, drinking spiritual energy-filled spring water every day? Only a few old monsters of sects in the mainland could possibly have similar privileges. They would have to take over a mountain with an abundance of spiritual energy to achieve results similar to what the spiritual energy water brought Wang Lin. Spiritual energy held an important place in all cultivators' hearts. Although in the country of Zhao there wasn't an overabundance of spiritual energy, it was enough for the few sects that existed. If other cultivators knew of how Wang Lin was using spiritual energy, their hearts would ache to death. If Wang Lin's spiritual energy spring water would be used to make immortal pills, it would increase the success rate. Although making immortal pills was all about the ingredients, a bit of extra spiritual energy could work wonders. With the help of the endless reservoir of spiritual energy contained within the bead, the quantity of spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body had increased more and more. Today, when Wang Lin was cultivating in the dream space, he could clearly feel the spiritual energy move within his body. With his breath, 2 long white dragons came from his nose. A feeling of ants crawling in his body arose. It felt as if water was washing every part of his body. Black liquid that smelled very bad excreted from his pores. Soon, the black liquid soaked his clothes. Wang Lin didn't care about it at all. He was currently in a wonderful state, as if he could see the spring water rushing inside him, while the spiritual energy slowly changed his body. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lin opened his eyes. There was a light in his eyes that was never there before. His mind was clear and his heart was as calm as water without a single ripple. His childhood flooded through his mind. His father's loving look when he was learning to talk, his mother's supporting words when he was studying all night, his parents' looks of expectation when he entered the Hang Yue sect, his relatives' ridiculing faces, and the villagers' admiring looks. He saw all of these things calmly, as if he was a stranger. Much later, he took a deep breath. His heart felt bitter. When he had stepped into the first layer of QI condensation, he gained a hint of understanding. According to the 3 stages of QI condensation, the first layer of QI condensation was like a gate. Once one opened the gate, they could enter the ranks of cultivators and would cut themselves off from the world, giving up worldly affairs. Everyone would experience this when they entered the first layer of QI condensation. He didn't know how others handled it, but he could cut off all worldly affairs except for his parents' love. With a sigh, Wang Lin dusted his shirt and stood up. With bright eyes, he looked around and could already feel that there was a difference in the dream space. Like before, he couldn't tell if there was anything weird with the glowing lights around him. But now he could feel spiritual energy moving within them. Even though he couldn't see the exact movement, compared to before, he was like a blind man who had become able to see. While watching, the feeling of being torn apart appeared again. Although there was still pain, it was a lot less, and wouldn't result in cold sweat anymore. Wang Lin opened his eyes. He sat on his bed, thinking for a while, and immediately opened the gourd. When he looked inside, he could now see the spiritual energy that filled the spring water. He let out a smile. After reaching the first layer of QI condensation, he could feel the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He took a deep breath. Wang Lin suddenly found that his body was sticky and let out a laugh. It was mentioned in the 3 stages of QI condensation that after reaching the first layer of QI condensation, the filth in the body would be expelled. It was a necessary stage for the body's transformation. Wang Lin opened his door. It was now afternoon outside. His steps were quick as he left through the east gate and arrived at a downstream location. He took off his clothes and jumped into the river to wash his body. The dark filth was very greasy and took a long time to scrub off. After he finished washing, he lied down on a rock. He remembered a technique in the 3 stages of QI condensation. It introduced an immortal technique called attractive force technique. This was considered one of the most basic immortal techniques and could be used as long as one had reached the first layer of QI condensation. The Heng Yu sect unified the country of Zhao 500 years ago. Although it had declined, it still contained many immortal techniques. Every disciple would be sent to the scripture library to choose one of many techniques, but most elders recommended sword cultivation technique. Sword cultivation technique was to focus the entire cultivation on the sword. Although cultivation would be difficult in the future, it was very powerful early on and easy to control. The attractive force technique was the basis for controlling flying swords. Besides the attractive force technique, there were 2 more techniques recorded in the 3 stage of QI condensation. They were fireball and earth-splitting technique. Reading so much. Besides the golden keyboard is active, I ask everyone to support a bit more, not just words of support. I'm afraid I can't even carry the last 3. Chapter domain. Wang Lin hesitated a bit, then said to the old man, "Senior, are we just going like this?" The old man waved his hand and made 2 straw hats appear. "Wear this. Unless someone is 2 cultivation levels above you, they won't be able to see your appearance. This is something I've saved for a long time. When you are done, you have to return it to me," he said. Wang Lin caught the hat, scanned it with his divine sense, and was immediately shocked. Although the straw hat looked normal, there were secrets hidden within it. Using his divine sense, he found that the hat contained countless restrictions that he had never seen before. They were comparable to ancient restrictions. And this was only the outer layer of restrictions. As for the restrictions in the center, Wang Lin couldn't even check that far with his divine sense in such a short period of time. Wang Lin had decided that no matter what, he wouldn't be returning this hat. If anything, he will just have to make a few more carvings. When the old man wore the hat, a golden light surrounded him. When Wang Lin tried to scan the old man, the golden light inflicted pain on him. Wang Lin took a deep breath. The desire to keep the straw hat became even stronger as he silently put it on. The old man looked at Wang Lin as his right hand formed a very strange seal and pointed to the air. Suddenly, a giant ghost appeared in the air. As it appeared, the surrounding spiritual energy violently gathered toward the ghost. Almost immediately, the ghost became solid and became a giant in golden armor holding a sword. The giant's face was grim. It was as if it was an evil god revealing a violent aura. It angrily stared at the location the old man pointed to. The old man proudly shouted, "Gold! Smash!" The golden-armored giant waved its sword without a word. Suddenly, a beam of golden light appeared. It was as if the sun was crashing down. The beam flew across the sky. Suddenly, in the distance, violent ripples appeared. The ripples became more and more violent until a light screen shattered into tiny pieces with a loud bang. Shortly after, the golden-armored giant let out a snort and gradually faded. The old man immediately mumbled in dissatisfaction. Wang Lin could kinda hear that the old man was scolding the golden-armored giant for being lazy. The moment the screen shattered, a wave of energy immediately spread out from the point of the impact. This energy was filled with destructive power. Wang Lin's expression suddenly changed. Just as he was about to dodge, the old man waved his hand and a pillar appeared before Wang Lin, blocking the energy wave. Then, Wang Lin looked at old man. He was standing in the energy wave and seemed to be enjoying it. As the energy wave finished spreading out, the area suddenly changed and buildings appeared one by one. These buildings floated on the clouds and emitted rainbow-colored lights. This place looked like the celestial realm. This scene was several times more majestic than what Wang Lin saw back in Chu. The buildings seemed to go on endlessly. At the same time, waves of angry shouts came from these buildings and a few dozen or so powerful auras charged out. Wang Lin spread out his divine sense. Among these auras there were more than 30 nascent soul cultivators. The remaining 5 were soul formation cultivators. He took a deep breath. This rank 4 cultivation country was really deserving of its rank. A sect here, whether big or small, was not something a rank 3 cultivation country could deal with. It was not an exaggeration to say that any sect here could wipe out a rank 3 cultivation country. After the cultivators came out, they immediately fanned out and surrounded Wang Lin and the old man. They revealed hostile expressions and sent out their divine senses to scan Wang Lin and the old man. However, after just an instant, more than half of them revealed surprised expressions. Wang Lin could clearly feel that when their divine senses swept past them, the straw hats released large amounts of golden light. The golden light made their divine senses melt like ice touching fire. As for the old man, he formed a seal, and the golden light formed a pair of ghostly wings. The wings flapped and all of the divine senses around him were swept away. Suddenly, a few cultivators let out grunts. Their bodies slumped, and their expressions became very ugly. A middle-aged man wearing a blue robe flew out from the group. This person's face was pale, and his eyes had no light. His eyes were like Wang Lin's, revealing a clear difference between black and white. They revealed an extraordinary light. After he walked out, he clasped his hands and said, "The two of you broke my White Cloud Sect's grand formation. If you don't explain this, then the two of you should just stay here." The old man snorted. He waved his hand and took out a bamboo chair. He placed it in the air, sat down on it, then said, "I don't care. I am just a hired hand. He asked me to come, so talk to him." The middle-aged man revealed a hint of dread in his eyes, but the person he was dreading wasn't Wang Lin. It was the old man. After hearing the old man's words, his gaze fell on Wang Lin. He said, "Fellow cultivator, has my White Cloud sect offended you before?" Wang Lin pondered a little. Then, without a word, he took out a normal flying sword from his bag of holding. He lightly shook the sword and imprinted his divine sense onto it. Then, crackling sounds followed as the sword transformed into a small silver ball. Because the White Cloud sect has many soul formation cultivators, I wish to challenge them all. I hope you can forgive my intrusion. With that, he suddenly moved his right hand to form a seal and pointed at the silver ball. The silver ball suddenly flew out, creating sonic booms. It was as if it could rip the sky apart. The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with caution, but when he saw the silver ball, he sneered. "You re-biting off more than you can chew." With that, he didn't take out a treasure. Instead, he pointed to the air and purple spiritual energy appeared on his finger. The moment the spiritual energy appeared, it turned into a purple dragon. The silver ball suddenly stopped as Wang Lin changed techniques and shouted, "Change!" Suddenly, the silver ball began to move strangely and transformed into a turtle-like creature. This creature was something Wang Lin had killed in the Sea of Devils, a zhonggu. The zhonghu beast created by the silver ball suddenly became alive and revealed its sharp teeth as it let out a roar. The roar ripped through the sky, and the zhonggu started fighting with the purple dragon. The middle-aged man let out a cold snort as he formed a seal and shouted, "Split!" Suddenly, the purple dragon split into two. One of them slipped past the zhonggu towards Wang Lin. Wang Lin frowned and was about to dodge when the old man's voice entered his ears. "What are you dodging, hiding for? Don't move. Experience a soul formation cultivator's domain." Wang Lin hesitated a bit, then placed his hand on his bag of holding. If anything goes wrong, he would bring out the restriction flag. The reason he wasn't using his normal magic treasures was because he was afraid that his identity would be found out. After hearing the old man's words, Wang Lin took a deep breath. Scenes of meeting the old man flashed through his mind. He then clenched his teeth and kept his body motionless. Although it sounded slow, all of this happened in an instant as the two purple dragons charged at him. The old man's eyes were filled with praise toward Wang Lin. Although Wang Lin's expression didn't reveal anything, how could the old man not see the struggle Wang Lin was going through? He glanced sideways at the two purple dragons and lifted his right hand. With a gentle squeeze, one of the purple dragons was crushed. The middle-aged man's expression changed greatly. The sense of dread he felt from the old man became even stronger. At this point, the remaining purple dragon, carrying a powerful aura and letting out a roar, landed on Wang Lin's body. Wang Lin's body shook. He could feel a powerful pressure enter his body. Although this pressure looked very powerful, after entering his body, it was like a gentle breath. It didn't have any offensive power and didn't bring him any harm. But in this gentle wind, there was a faint feeling of desperate emotion. This feeling expanded endlessly in the blink of an eye inside Wang Lin. Not even his nascent soul could escape this feeling. Wang Lin immediately knew that this desperate emotion was the sliver of domain inside the middle-aged man's technique. This domain was like divine retribution. There was no way for him to defend against it. If he were to take out the restriction flag and defend with layers of ancient restrictions, the feeling wouldn't be this strong. After all, when he fought with soul formation cultivators, the restriction flag was a must. But at this moment, in order to experience the domain, he didn't defend himself at all. As a result, it could be said that he was unarmed and naked against this soul formation cultivator's domain. The old man's eyes lit up and he reached out with his right hand. Suddenly, a sliver of purple gas came out of Wang Lin's forehead and formed a ball in the old man's hand while Wang Lin recovered his senses. Wang Lin closed his eyes. At that moment, he was able to fully experience the middle-aged man's domain. Such opportunities could only be wished for and were very valuable. The old man's hand needed the purple ball and crushed it. The middle-aged man's face was very ugly as he stared at the old man and said, "I am guessing that Senior is here to allow your disciple to experience domain in order to break into the soul formation stage." The old man let out a mischievous smile. He pointed at the person next to the middle-aged man and said, "You, come up. It is your turn." Fans celebrating the new year, please join the VIDEO fan battle team. If you need to complete a mission, Leo can praise everyone in the chapter narration. Chapter Ancestral Spirit Token. The person the old man pointed at was an old woman. Her eyes were slightly dim as she stared at the old man and said, "Although Senior's cultivation level is sky high, that doesn't mean you can order my white cloud sect around." The old man mumbled a few words. He impatiently took out a dirty and old bag of holding. He searched through the bag for a long time and finally took out a black wooden token. There was still grease and vegetable leaves on the token as he casually threw it into the old woman's hand. The moment the old woman saw the token, her expression changed and she shouted, "Ancestral spirit token?" The middle-aged man immediately reached out and grabbed the token. He formed a few seals and placed it on the token. The token suddenly revealed a rainbow-colored light that lingered. The middle-aged man suddenly let out a wry smile and respectfully said to the old man, "Since Senior has the ancestral spirit token, we must obey. But is Senior sure that you want to use the ancestral spirit token to have all of the soul formation cultivators of the White Cloud sect help your disciple experience domain?" The old man proudly smiled at Wang Lin and snorted at the middle-aged man. He shouted, "Of course! Now stop with this nonsense! You come out!" With that he pointed at the old woman. The old woman pondered for a bit and respectfully nodded. She moved forward, looked at Wang Lin with a complex expression, and said, "You have a good teacher. If I had a chance to experience domains when I was trying to reach the soul formation stage, I would have had a much smoother path." Ah. With that she opened her mouth and spat out a sliver of pink spiritual energy. The moment it appeared, a nice-smelling fragrance began to spread. The pink spiritual energy shot toward Wang Lin like a sword. It stopped 3 inches before Wang Lin and turned into a pink mist that then surrounded him. Slowly experienced this old woman-esque domain. Inside the pink mist, Wang Lin felt very warm. His spiritual energy and nascent soul gained a sliver of laziness. As his killing aura and his determination to cultivate began to fade, Wang Lin felt sleepy thanks to that sensation. It was as if nothing mattered in the world. But at the same moment, a ball of killing aura flew out of his bag of holding and entered Wang Lin's body. Shortly after, a powerful killing aura washed over him like a bucket of cold water dumped over his head. The killing aura spread throughout his body. The old woman was surprised. She gently waved her hand and retrieved the pink gas. Wang Lin took a deep breath. If it wasn't tea for the killing aura ball, he would have completely lost himself in the domain. This type of feeling was extremely scary. Aside from the original dread he felt towards soul formation cultivators, there was now an extra bit of caution. The old woman looked at Wang Lin. She backed up and no longer talked. The old man's gaze swept the group and landed on a cyan-robed old man. His eyes lit up and he said, Your domain is very special. Once he experiences it, we won't bother you anymore." That old man raised his head. He didn't even look at Wang Lin while saying, "He can withstand my domain." The old man raised his eyebrow. He waved his hand and said, "Nonsense! With me here, even if your White Cloud sect-ass ancestor old man Bai Yun were to come here personally, I would still be able to hold it off." With that, he mischievously looked toward the deep part of the White Cloud sect. The cyan-robed man didn't say anymore and patted his own head. Suddenly, a black opening appeared on his forehead and a black sword came out. The sword turned into a bolt of lightning and arrived before Wang Lin. Its speed was something Wang Lin couldn't defend against at all. His face was very ugly. If he had the restriction flag, he would be able to block it, but he wouldn't be able to hold it off for too long. However, Wang Lin was not afraid. Although he couldn't resist the sword, if this was a real fight, thanks to the sliver of divine retribution, all soul formation cultivators would be wary of him, no matter how powerful their techniques were. For example, against this flying sword, if Wang Lin were to send out the sliver of divine retribution, then the cyan-robed men would have to call back the flying sword otherwise. They would just kill each other. When the cyan-robed man's flying sword arrived 10 feet before Wang Lin, a sudden wave of killing intent came from the sword. Within that killing intent, there was a bit of a mysterious domain. This domain was very different from the two from earlier. It was as if it carried a sliver of the heaven's might. Wang Lin immediately noticed that his own spiritual energy showed signs of weakening. If his spiritual energy was replaced by his life force, then his life would be quickly drained away. This strange domain caused Wang Lin's expression to change greatly. This domain currently only affected his spiritual energy. If it could affect life force, then it would be a terrifying heaven-defying existence. The cyan-robed cultivator's expression was plain as he waved his hand, and the flying sword returned to him. The sword disappeared back into his forehead as he slowly said, "My domain is the passing of time." The old man's eyes focused on the cyan-robed old man. Because of the fluctuations in spiritual energy, he knew that this cyan-robed old man had an uncommon domain. But he hadn't expected it to be the passing of time. He took a deep breath, and the look of surprise disappeared from his face. At the moment he looked very dignified. Although his face looked dirty, that couldn't mask his noble aura. Wang Lin suddenly felt disillusioned. It was as if this old man had instantly changed. If someone were to tell him that his old man was an expert from the country of Suzaku, he wouldn't be surprised. What an amazing domain! If you can reach the Winding stage, that domain will be heaven-defying. You guys, take the token. Goodbye! The old man took a deep breath. His body moved and appeared next to Wang Lin. He grabbed Wang Lin and they disappeared. When they reappeared, they were in an abandoned area of the capital. After the two of them reappeared, the old man was breathing very hard, and his face was pale, but it was still filled with pride. He looked at Wang Lin, waiting to be praised. The current him no longer had the feeling of an expert. Wang Lin felt helpless as he placed the straw hat in his bag of holding and said, "Senior S technique is beyond amazing. It's something Junior has never seen before. I really admire it." The old man rolled his eyes and disapprovingly said, "You only know this one line." Wang Lin pondered for a bit, then wryly smiled. When in his life did he ever have to flatter someone? He really didn't know where to begin. The old man breathed heavily. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it. You already finished experiencing domains, so quickly reach the soul formation stage so you can make those wooden carvings for me." With that, he turned around to leave. Wang Lin pondered a little. Seeing that the old man was about to leave, he asked, "What kind of item is that ancestral spirit token?" The old man turned around to look at Wang Lin. He let out a smile filled with pride and said, "That piece of junk isn't much. I have plenty of them here." With that, he took out various tokens and said, "This is the Heaven Escape Sect S. This is the Spirit Fog Sect S. This is the Rank 4 Cultivation Country S Giant Demon Clan S. This is the Rank Cultivation Country S." Wang Lin gawked at him as he introduced each token. The old man's face was filled with pride. It was as if the things in his hands were his favorite toys. Finally, the old man waved his hand. He took out a blank token and said, "Besides those, I can make a token for any sect for you. I have sold countless tokens over the years. You can go check out my reputation if you want. It is very good. How about the White Cloud Sect Head S token?" Wang Lin pondered for a bit. He looked at the old man once more, then turned around and left. The old man talked for a long time before finally putting the tokens away and saying, "These things are my treasures. If you can appreciate them, then I want sell them to you." Wang Lin walked directly back to the shop and sat down cross-legged next to the stove. The surroundings were completely quiet. In this silence, the experiences he had with the domains flashed through his mind. He became completely immersed in recalling his experiences as he tried to understand them. The middle-aged man's desperate emotion domain, the old woman's comfort domain, and the cyan-robbed man's passing of time domain all floated inside Wang Lin's mind. After a while, Wang Lin gained a sliver of understanding. This domain was something that was obtained when someone was perceiving the heavens based on their life experiences. Then, what would his own domain be? Wang Lin closed his eyes. In that moment, his entire being changed. After a long time, he opened his eyes and grabbed a knife to begin carving. The wooden chips fell to the ground. His knife flowed smoothly like water and without rest. Gradually, the piece of wood took the shape of someone forming a seal with one hand. Wang Lin's eyes became focused. At the moment, nothing could disturb Wang Lin's concentration. What his mind was thinking about and what his eyes were seeing were the old man's desperate emotion domain. The amount of wood shavings on the ground increased. The speed of Wang Lin's knife increased until it formed afterimages. After a long time, Wang Lin's right hand suddenly paused. The knife in his right hand broke in half. The blade of the knife flew into a shelf and let out a buzzing sound. Wang Lin didn't pay attention to any of this as he looked at the carving in his hand. The carving was already completed. The middle-aged man looked like he was alive. The carving contained a sliver of desperate emotion domain. However, this domain wasn't being released at all. It was completely contained within the carving. Wang Lin slowly closed his eyes. After feeling it for a long time, he gently placed the middle-aged man's carving on the ground. Wang Lin muttered to himself, "It is still not enough." It's time to double the likes for the VIDEO, wishing for more likes for the VIDEO. Chapter Latter Years. Wang Lin could only imitate the desperate emotion domain. Although he was eventually able to finish the carving, it was still very different from the middle-aged man's desperate emotion domain. Wang Lin looked at the broken carving knife. He waved his hand and the blade flew onto a shelf on the side. He took out another piece of wood and used his finger as a carving knife. Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. In these 10 years, Wang Lin's appearance became even older. Strands of white hair appeared on his head, his straight back had become somewhat hunched, and he overall looked like he had entered his latter years. The amount of carvings had gradually decreased. In these past 10 years, Wang Lin had only finished one carving, which was the old woman from the White Cloud sect. Actually, he had finished the old woman's carving 9 years ago. Although it was similar to the middle-aged man's carving and far from as powerful as the original, he knew that this was because he hadn't reached the soul formation stage yet. The reason Wang Lin hadn't finished another carving was the cyan-robed old man. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't seem to carve the passing of time domain into his carving of the old man. He had tried for 9 years without any success. Although he had crafted countless carvings of the old man, none of them contained the old man's domain. In the end, all of them were destroyed by him. On this day, Wang Lin looked at the carving of the old man. He let out a sigh and waved his hand over the carving. The carving turned to dust. Then, he stood up and opened the door of the shop. The gentle sunlight fell on his body as he sat on a wooden chair and looked at the passing people. The ironworks shop across the street had expanded several times in these past 10 years. Not long after, a 4-year-old boy peeked his head out from the ironworks shop. When he saw Wang Lin, he let out a smile and ran toward Wang Lin with a jug of wine in his hand. After handing the wine to Wang Lin, he asked, "Grandpa Wang, I secretly stole this wine for you. Where is the candy?" Wang Lin let out a smile. He rubbed the boy's head as he took out a pill the size of his fingernail. He threw the pill at the boy and took a drink from the jug. The boy quickly swallowed the candy and displayed a satisfied look. Then, he leaned his head on his 2 small hands and asked, "Grandpa Wang, does this wine taste good? I see you drinking it every day." Wang Lin faintly smiled. At that moment, a sturdy young man came out from the ironworks shop. One could see a resemblance between this young man and the little boy from back then. When the young man saw Wang Lin, his eyes flooded with emotion and he said, "Uncle Wang, you can drink anymore today." Wang Lin laughed and said, "Okay, just one more drink and I won't drink anymore." "Daniu, how is your father?" Daniu's face darkened as he replied, "Same old illness. It's not a big deal." Wang Lin secretly sighed. He couldn't interfere with a mortal's life. Growing old and getting sick was a natural part of life. Daniu married shopkeeper Zhao's daughter, and this little boy was his son. The little boy pulled Wang Lin's sleeves and asked, "Grandpa Wang, you still haven't told me if this wine tastes good or not." Daniu looked at Wang Lin. He secretly sighed and said, "What your Grandpa Wang is drinking is not wine, but ginseng." Wang Lin looked at Daniu. His eyes were filled with praise, and then he said, "Daniu, take the kid home. I am going to go walk around the block." Daniu took the wine from Wang Lin's hand. He placed it inside the shop and closed the door. Then he said, "You promised me earlier that you won't drink anymore today." Wang Lin smiled as he got up and walked down the street. His slightly staggering figure was filled with age. Daniu let out a sigh and held the boy's hand on the way back to the ironworks shop. The boy smiled and happily said, "Dad, the candy Grandpa Wang gives me sure is tasty. Every time I eat it, my body feels warm." Wang Lin walked down the street he had lived on for all these years. All of the shopkeepers seemed to have heard of this. They all came out with panicked faces and begged before Wang Lin. "Shopkeeper Wang, you have to understand that this business is not easy to run. Next month, I promise, next month I'll pay the rent." This was a new grocery shopkeeper that had moved in 3 years ago. "It is true, Lord Wang. Business really isn't good right now. How about you wait for a few days?" This was the fat inn owner. Similar voices came from everywhere. He couldn't help but to wryly smile. He didn't know how it came to be, but in the past 10 years almost every house on this street owed him money. Even most of the shops now belonged to him. Every time there was a shop owner who needed money, they would pledge their shop to borrow money from him. As for Wang Lin's own shop, the owner came and sold it to him 2 years ago. Of course, the price was sky high. Even now, every time Wang Lin came out, these shopkeepers would come up and try to get on Wang Lin's good side. In fact, this had to do with the fact that Wang Lin didn't come out much. Sometimes he would not come out for months at a time, so whenever he appeared, these shopkeepers would be nervous, afraid that he had come for their rent. In truth, the rent wasn't too much money, but anyone who had lived here for a while knew that Wang Lin was really good-natured, so they started to delay their rent payments. Eventually, it became a habit for everyone to not pay rent. After all, no one in the mortal world would want to use up silver. Everyone thought the more the better. Wang Lin really didn't care about this at all, so he just let whatever happened happen and considered it part of understanding the heavens. In these 9 years, everything had changed greatly. Not many of the old faces remained. This caused Wang Lin to feel very regretful as he waved his hand at the shopkeepers and said, "I'm not collecting rent today. You can all leave." All of the shopkeepers let out breaths and left. Wang Lin walked down the street with his hands behind his back. After a short while, he arrived at the end of the street. But just at that moment, a large horse being ridden by a middle-aged man charged toward him. The middle-aged man's expression was very ugly, and there was fresh blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. He rode the horse past the corner, and just as he passed by Wang Lin, his eyes widened. He quickly pulled the reins, and, as the horse let out a long neigh, he jumped down from its back. He arrived before Wang Lin, but before he could even speak, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Within the blood there were pieces of his internal organs. His face was pale as he knelt on the ground and said, "Please save me, Mr. Wang." Wang Lin's expression was normal as he looked at the person. This person was the one who would always visit him on the holidays and give him a large amount of money, Shu Tao. Wang Lin said, "If there is any problem, tell me." "Mr. Wang, His Highness is in danger." After hearing Shu Tao's frantic words, Wang Lin gradually understood what had happened. His Highness had somehow angered a very powerful cultivator. Once that cultivator appeared, all of the cultivators around His Highness backed off, unwilling to get involved. As of today, His Highness was hiding inside the palace. The cultivator felt it would be troublesome to enter the palace, so he was unloading all of his anger on His Highness' followers. Shu Tao was very smart. When he noticed that something was wrong, he immediately ran away, but he was still hit by the cultivator, so he panicked. At that moment, he could only think of Wang Lin. Just as Shu Tao was speaking, a young cultivator walked around the corner. He looked very bossy as he walked towards Shu Tao. After Shu Tao saw the cultivator, his body shivered, and he coughed out another mouthful of blood before slumping over. He looked at Wang Lin in desperation and pleaded, "Save me." With that, he passed out. The cultivator sneered as he looked at Wang Lin and waved his hand. Immediately, a black gas invisible to mortal eyes spread out and formed a giant skull in the air. The skull moved toward Shu Tao to devour him. This cultivator was evidently very cruel as he included Wang Lin in the attack as well. In his eyes, although Wang Lin was only a mortal, because Shu Tao fled to where Wang Lin was, then their relationship must be deep, so he might as well kill them both. As for any trouble caused by mortals, his master will resolve the issue for him. Thinking about that, his expression became very cruel. Wang Lin furrowed his brow. If this cultivator had only targeted Shu Tao, then he wouldn't have acted. Although Shu Tao had been very respectful toward him all these years, that wasn't enough for Wang Lin to act. But now, this mere foundation establishment cultivator dared to include him in the attack. Wang Lin's expression was normal, and his eyes were calm as he waved his hand as if he was shooing away mosquitoes. Suddenly, the skull seemed to have seen something very scary. It let out a scream and no longer dared to move forward to devour. It backed away instead, but it was still a step too slow. As Wang Lin waved his hand, the devil Shu Liguo appeared and devoured the skull. He loudly chewed the skull before swallowing it, and then gave the little cultivator a fierce glance before slowly disappearing. The little cultivator's face became red and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. This happened because when the skull was destroyed, his soul sustained damage. Then, without a word, the little cultivator ran away in fear. Wang Lin coldly stared at the figure that was running away. He didn't kill him because he was nearly done with turning into a mortal, and didn't want to waste effort on this little matter. As usual, 2 chapters at noon, about 10 minutes apart, and 2 more at 8 in the evening, 10 minutes apart. If anything comes up, the other will be informed. Longing for the like button for the video. Chapter Candy. Only a few short moments had passed between the little cultivator's arrival and his departure. Adding on the fact that the technique he used wasn't visible to mortals, and therefore did not attract the attention of mortals, most people just felt a cold wind blow by. However, there were a lot less people on the streets. The reason for this was Shu Tao, who had coughed up blood and fainted. Shu Tao's old home had already moved from this street 8 years ago, so no one recognized him anymore. Wang Lin let out a sigh. With his hands behind his back, he walked into a grocery store. As he entered, the shopkeep quickly came to greet him. Wang Lin pointed at Shu Tao, who was passed out in the street, and said, "Shopkeeper, please get 2 workers to carry him to my shop." The grocery store's shopkeeper hesitated for a bit. He inconspicuously looked around, and then, when he realized that no one was looking, he said to Wang Lin, "Shopkeeper Wang, we don't even know if this person is dead or alive. Let us report this to the officials. You might get into a lot of trouble otherwise." Wang Lin smiled. He patted the shopkeeper's shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Find someone to carry him for me." With that, he turned around and slowly walked away with his hands behind his back. The shopkeeper looked at Wang Lin's back. He sighed and said, "A good person." Shopkeeper Wang is really a good person. After he finished muttering to himself, he shouted, "Little 2 and little 3, come out and carry that person to shopkeeper Wang's store." Just as Wang Lin arrived back at his shop, 2 young workers carried Shu Tao over, and following Wang Lin's instructions, placed on him the floor of the shop. Wang Lin casually handed them a few silver coins and sent the 2 young workers on their way. Then, he sat down beside the stove and began to silently ponder. If he doesn't help him, Shu Tao won't be able to live. Wang Lin let out a sigh. Considering how respectful Shu Tao had been for the past 10 years, Wang Lin took out the most inferior pill from his bag of holding and pushed it into Shu Tao's mouth. Then he picked up the jug of wine and drank while waiting for Shu Tao to wake up. As for the little cultivator, he ran away in panic. He didn't care about alarming mortals, so he took out his flying sword and flew east. In the eastern suburb of the city, there was a temple. This temple was very quiet, and in front of it was a pond with lotuses and blooming pink flowers. The crisp green lotus leaves floated in the pond, and the fish gently touched them, creating ripples that looked very calming. A path made of cobblestone came down from the temple. On its sides were some willow trees. When the wind blew, the willow trees rustled. All of this created a very beautiful scenery. At this moment, although there was a breeze, the sound of the rustling leaves was suppressed by the sound of flying. The little cultivator suddenly landed before the temple door and coughed out blood. His face was pale as he opened up the temple door and ran inside. The few cultivators sitting cross-legged inside the temple opened their eyes. One of them saw how bad the little cultivator's condition was. He walked up and asked, "Junior apprentice brother, how could a mere mortal cause you such heavy injuries?" The little cultivator pushed the person aside and said, "I need to see Master." "Master, what is the panic?" From inside the temple came a middle-aged man. This person's face was wide and his eyes were small. His large ears were very noticeable, but upon closer inspection, he looked very dignified. When this person appeared, all the cultivators that were cultivating stood up and respectfully stood on the sides. After the little cultivator saw the middle-aged man, he knelt on the ground and said, "Master, someone destroyed my guardian spirit and damaged my soul. Master, please get revenge for me." The large-eared cultivator looked at the little cultivator. Then, he waved his sleeves and reached out with his hand. Suddenly, rolls of black gas gathered in the air, forming a giant skull. Next, the large-eared cultivator pointed at the skull, then grabbed it and, without a word, pushed it into the little cultivator's forehead. The little cultivator's expression became painful as black gas covered his face. He then coughed out a mouthful of black blood, and the black gas on his face slowly disappeared. His face was now red, and the damage he had suffered from his guardian's spirit being destroyed had been healed. The large-eared cultivator waved his right hand and slowly said, "Tell me what happened." The little cultivator took a deep breath and quickly recounted what had happened, adding a bunch of extra details. The little cultivator sounded very smart as he spoke, and the large-eared cultivator just silently listened. The other disciples didn't say anything, but they all had weird looks in their eyes. Before long, the little cultivator finished speaking. His eyes were filled with hatred. "Master, I have already told him your name, but this guy was too arrogant. Master, no matter what, we have to teach him a lesson," he added. The large-eared cultivator's expression was calm as he looked at the little cultivator and said, "Are you sure that when you saw this cultivator, he had no spiritual energy at all, as if he was a mortal?" The little cultivator quickly nodded and said, "Yes, master, that is correct. At first I thought he was just a mortal." The large-eared cultivator's eyes revealed a strange light. He didn't seem angry as he said to the little cultivator, "Take a trip with me and lead the way." There is no need to use any techniques. We will walk. The little cultivator was very happy and quickly led the large-eared cultivator out of the temple. As for the remaining cultivators, some wanted to follow, but seeing that Master didn't say anything, they hesitated. One of them let out a sigh and said, "Master spoils junior apprentice brother too much." A middle-aged man wryly smiled and slowly said, "This isn't the first time. These kind of things happen too often. With Master S wisdom, how could he not see the lies in junior brother S words? It is best we don't bother with it too much. With junior apprentice brother S personality, sooner or later he will get into big trouble." Ah! Someone else muttered a few words. The first person who talked regretfully said, "With Master here, even if junior apprentice brother gets into big trouble, he should still be fine. If it was one of us, then it would be hard to say. This is not the first time that we've witnessed Master favoring junior apprentice brother. Even junior apprentice brother S cultivation method is different from ours. Forget it. As long as we know it in our hearts, it is fine. If we say it out loud, it will make us sound stingy." I wonder which disciple of which sect angered junior apprentice brother this time. From what he said, this person was mixed in with mortals. The 4-sect alliance is really big and has all kinds of cultivators. I guess that cultivator is at the core formation stage if he was able to destroy junior apprentice brother S guardian spirit so easily. What is the point of us talking about this? With Master S standing in the 4-sect alliance, not to mention core formation cultivators, even nascent soul cultivators want to stand a change. They talked about it for a bit, then continued to cultivate. As the little cultivator walked, he felt very proud. He knew that Master had always been the best to him. Maybe it was because he was Master S' personal disciple. Since he was small, every time he had problems, all he had to do was tell Master. Master would then take him and wipe out whoever he wanted. Throughout all these years, his master had never refused once. He secretly sneered. Now that his master was here, he would let that person die without a resting place and let that guy know the consequences of messing with him. Thinking about this, he secretly looked at his master and saw that he didn't have any expression. He secretly smiled because he knew that the more expressionless his master was, the more angry he was. In his memory, every time his master took him to go wipe out someone that messed with him, his master always had this expression. Regardless of who he made an enemy of, when they saw his master, their faces all turned pale. Some begged for mercy, some tried to run away, and some even attempted to fight back. But no matter what happened, all 3 types of people saw the same ending. The pride in the little cultivator S heart inflated, making him feel as if he had just eaten sweets. He started to walk quickly, hoping that that person hadn't ran away already. As they walked, the larger cultivator suddenly stopped. The little cultivator quickly took a few steps back and saw that the large-eared cultivator was looking at a stall that sold candy. The large-eared cultivator S eyes revealed a gentle light as he walked up and softly asked, "How much is this candy?" When the vendor of the stall saw the large-eared person, for some unknown reason, he developed a good feeling toward him and replied, "Just 1 copper coin is enough." The large-eared cultivator smiled and nodded, then took out a copper coin. After giving the copper coin to the vendor, he looked closely at the different candies and picked one up. The little cultivator was startled. This was the first time he had seen the large-eared cultivator buy candy, so he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But what he didn't expect was the large-eared cultivator handing the candy to him. "Fu Air, when I first met you, you were fighting with a bunch of kids over candy. Maybe you have already forgotten." The large-eared cultivator S eyes were filled with regret. The little cultivator was startled and couldn't help but think of his bitter childhood. If it wasn't for his master, then he would probably be dead already. His eyes became slightly red, and he whispered, "I haven't forgotten. It is Master who took me away from there and taught me cultivation." The large-eared cultivator rubbed the little cultivator S head and said, "Let S go. Take me to that person." As the little cultivator looked at the candy, scenes of his childhood replayed in his mind. He took a deep breath and carefully put the candy inside his bag of holding. He decided to keep it for the rest of his life because this was something his master bought for him. Mid-month already, brothers. Do you have likes for the VIDE already? Don't hold back wishing for those likes. Chapter 263 will die within 100 years. The sky was getting dark, and by the time the large-eared cultivator and the little cultivator arrived at Wang Lin's shop, it was already dark. However, there were lights coming from the sides of the street. Shu Tao woke up in a haze. After hesitating for a while, he quickly got a bearing of his surroundings and got up. When he saw Wang Lin, he immediately knelt on the ground with an excited expression on his face, unable to say a word. Wang Lin's expression remained the same. He didn't even look at Shu Tao as he said, "I saved your life to repay your 16 years of commitment. You can leave." Shu Tao hesitated for a bit before kowtowing a few more times and whispering, "Thank you for your kindness. I'll remember it forever." With that, he took a deep breath, stood up, and opened the door to leave. Just at that moment, Wang Lin frowned and said, "Shu Tao, come back." Also, don't bother closing the door. Shu Tao's body shook as he quickly came back and looked at Wang Lin with a confused expression. Wang Lin took a sip of the wine in his hand and plainly said, "Stand to the side. We have guests." Shu Tao's expression slightly changed as he stood next to Wang Lin. His eyes trembled as he looked at the door. Shortly after, one could hear soft footsteps closing in. Soon, a large-eared cultivator walked in along with the little cultivator that Wang Lin had let go earlier. Shu Tao immediately revealed a look of terror. He was able to immediately recognize that the large-eared cultivator was the one forcing the king to hide inside the palace. His heart was immediately in chaos, but after looking at Wang Lin, he forced himself from taking a step back. After the little cultivator entered the shop, he immediately laughed and shouted, "Master, it is him who injured me." The little cultivator turned around and was surprised to find that his master wasn't looking at the person, but at the wood carvings surrounding them. Wang Lin still hadn't talked. He was casually drinking wine. He only looked at the two of them once before withdrawing his gaze. The large-eared cultivator carefully looked at each wood carving before his attention suddenly focused on two carvings. These two carvings were the middle-aged man and old woman from the White Cloud sect. The large-eared cultivator looked for a long time, then let out a smile. He didn't behave like a stranger at all. He waved his sleeve and sat across from Wang Lin. "Fellow cultivator, how about letting me have a drink?" The large-eared cultivator gently took out a cup. Wang Lin looked at the person and threw the jug of wine forward. The large-eared cultivator caught the jug and poured a cup. When he drank it, his eyes revealed a strange light, and he said, "Delicious." Wang Lin chuckled. "Since you like it, then I'll gift you the rest of that jug." The large-eared cultivator let out a laugh. He didn't refuse the gift. He poured himself another cup and drank it. After a long time, he let out a sigh and said, "Fellow cultivator's cultivation level is higher than mine. Using the mortal world to turn into a mortal, I admire you." Wang Lin waved his right hand, and a jug of wine appeared in his grasp. He took a drink and said, "Fellow cultivator is using your disciple to turn into a mortal by using the emotion of a teacher and parent to comprehend the heavens. The result is the same as mine, so there is no need to admire." The strange light in the large-eared cultivator's eyes deepened as he looked at Wang Lin. He nodded and said, "It seems I was not mistaken. After hearing from my disciple, I guessed that there was someone else who was at the same realm as me. Someone else attempting to reach the soul formation stage in the capital." Wang Lin silently smiled. The large-eared cultivator faintly smiled. "Fellow cultivator, how about we have a competition and see which one of us will reach the mythical soul formation stage first?" he asked. Wang Lin faintly smiled at the large-eared cultivator and said, "If I gain a sense of competition in my heart, I'm afraid that I'll never reach the soul formation stage in my life." "Fellow cultivator, your words are very vicious." The large-eared cultivator let out a laugh as he waved his sleeves and clasped his hands. He said, "I didn't expect to meet a cultivator of your caliber here." "Good. My name is Zhou Tai. What should I call you?" Wang Lin picked up the jug of wine, took a drink, and said, "Wang Lin." Zhou Tai smiled and said, "Fellow cultivator Wang, you will definitely reach the soul formation stage within 100 years. I will congratulate you early today." Wang Lin's expression was calm as he said, "Fellow cultivator Zhou is speaking prematurely. From my point of view, whether fellow cultivator Zhou can reach the soul formation stage is uncertain, but that disciple of yours will definitely die within 100 years. Zhou Tai's eyes lit up, but he remained silent. The little cultivator wanted to give Wang Lin a vicious look, but seeing that his master seemed very familiar with him, he suppressed his anger. He let out a snort and thought that Wang Lin really didn't know any better. This was the first time he had seen his master talk like this to anyone. On top of that, not only was this person not grateful, He even spoke such vicious words. Even Shu Tao felt that Wang Lin's words were a bit too much. He became even more cautious, afraid that the large-eared cultivator would become enraged. But what surprised him was that after the large-eared cultivator finished pondering, not only did the large-eared cultivator not get mad, he displayed a bitter smile. With the little cultivator's cultivation level, he wasn't able to notice the battle between the large-eared cultivator and Wang Lin. As for Shu Tao, he was only a mortal, so there was no way he could feel how dangerous this exchange was. Although the large-eared cultivator seemed gentle ever since he entered, his intent was evil the entire time. Every word he had spoken and every action he had taken were filled with ill intent. Originally, he wanted to stir Wang Lin's competitive side. If he had succeeded, then he wouldn't have to ever bother with Wang Lin anymore because, in order to reach the soul formation stage, one must turn into a mortal to comprehend the heavens, which requires a calm heart. Once Wang Lin's heart becomes competitive, then he will be stuck and will never reach the soul formation stage. Even if Wang Lin one day manages to get rid of this blockade, it would be countless years later. This showed just how devious the large-eared cultivator was. Although his plan was foiled by Wang Lin, the large-eared cultivator didn't give up. He continued to congratulate Wang Lin on succeeding within 100 years. This was yet another trap for Wang Lin. Although the old man from before said the same thing, it was very different from when the large-eared cultivator said it. The old man was at a much higher cultivation level, and the Wang Lin back then wasn't at an important bottleneck. So instead of creating a mental block for Wang Lin, it boosted his confidence. The difference was that now these words came from the large-eared cultivator. Although they were the same words, the meaning was completely different. If Wang Lin really took it to heart, then as the years pass and he doesn't reach the soul formation stage within 100 years, he will never have another chance unless he gains a sudden enlightenment to get rid of the curse in his heart. Seeing that the large-eared cultivator kept trying to attack him, Wang Lin finally retaliated. He first said that whether the large-eared cultivator will reach the soul formation in 100 years was uncertain. This was a slightly modified version of what the large-eared cultivator said, but the result was the same. However, this wasn't the important part of Wang Lin's retaliation. His final sentence was the real retaliation. Within 100 years, that little cultivator will definitely die. This one sentence pointed out the basis of the large-eared cultivator-s and the little cultivator-s master-disciple relationship. The large-eared cultivator Zhou Wutai was turning into a mortal by comprehending the relationship of master and disciple. Using this desire to move his thoughts, he accepted a disciple. He would use love to educate a son, kindness to give him favor, his heart to love him. And the tragedy of losing his disciple to enter the soul formation stage. Everything that the large-eared cultivator had done so far was for the sake of this master-disciple relationship. When he finally feels his own domain and is about to enter the soul formation stage, that is the day when he will act and personally kill his disciple. He must kill the disciple that he had poured his heart into, and then use the sadness from it to finally enter the soul formation stage. His path appeared to be filled with emotion, but was ruthless, yet within that ruthlessness, there was emotion. This method was not something a normal person could go through with, at least it not something Wang Lin could do. That's why his last sentence was the real counterattack. First of all, it stated that the disciple will die within 100 years, which brought up the 100-year time limit again. Secondly, it exposed the true ruthless nature of the large-eared cultivator and brought up the sadness that he will feel in the future. At the same time, he also left a faint mark in the little cultivator's heart. The large-eared cultivator, Zhou Wutai, bitterly smiled as he looked at Wang Lin and stood up. He clasped his hands, then hesitated for a bit before saying to Shu Tao, "Tell your king to deliver the item to the temple within 3 days, and I'll let this go." With that, he looked at Wang Lin once more before turning around to leave. The little cultivator was completely startled and quickly followed his master. He felt like today was extremely weird because master didn't act like normal and didn't get revenge for him. At the same time, he couldn't help but think of Wang Lin's words, that he will die within 100 years. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but shiver. When he raised his head, he saw his master gently looking at him, and his heart couldn't help but feel warm. "Fu, there is no need to think about it so much. Why did you put the candy away and not eat it?" The large-eared cultivator's voice was gentle and filled with reassurance. The little cultivator's eyes became red as he answered, "Disciple has decided to keep it forever." The large-eared cultivator smiled as he rubbed the little cultivator's head. He silently smiled as he led the little cultivator, and they walked out of Wang Lin's street. Wang Lin sat inside the shop. He was lost in thought. After a long time, he let out a smile and decided not to think about it too much, or else it would mess with him as he approaches the end of the road of turning into a mortal. At the moment, Shu Tao was completely frozen. Originally, he just thought that Wang Lin was an expert. How could the wood carvings he had made cause the two immortals in the palace to be so shocked otherwise? He then carefully observed and found that Wang Lin's shop didn't have anything happen to it. The two immortals became silent and never talked about the carvings again. Even His Royal Highness had ordered him to gift Wang Lin during the New Year every year. Because he had done it for more than 10 years, when he was met with danger, the first person he thought of was Wang Lin. But he never would have imagined that Wang Lin was powerful enough to force the person who forced the king to hide inside palace and the immortals to not dare to come forth to give up so easily. It has to be said that a few days ago, His Highness wished he could have handed over the rain ding to save his life. Mid-month and it's been forgotten. Hoping for the like button for the video, tears start to flow. Is there still time? You are listening to a completely free audiobook on the Leo Audio YouTube channel. If you enjoy the story, please like the video to motivate the channel. Support Leo with a cup of coffee through the description link or on the screen. If you want to hear any other stories, just comment and let Leo know. Thank you very much for watching the video. Chapter 264, Life and Death Domain. After Shu Tao left, Wang Lin's life calmed down again. It was as if what had happened passed by like the clouds. Once they leave, they come back. Wang Lin still got up early every day and opened up his shop door to wait for Danyu's son to bring him a jug of wine. He would then sit there and carve while drinking. He had lived like this for many years, and this lifestyle had been carved into his bones. He was far from the road of killing. It was like the him from before and the him now were two completely different people. He no longer had any killing intent around him. Instead, he emitted a calm aura, a mortal existence. Wang Lin didn't know what the domain he will comprehend will be, but he wasn't in a rush as he calmly comprehended the heavens. 7 days after Shu Tao left, he came back with a middle-aged man who had the look of royalty on his face. This person respectfully came into the shop with Shu Tao. Not caring about his status, he knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Wang Lin's eyes scanned the person, but he didn't say anything. He could easily tell that this person was Shu Tao's superior, which meant that this was the highness the large-eared cultivator was after. In the eyes of a normal mortal, His Highness was someone high above them, but in Wang Lin's eyes, this person was like an ant. Although this person had some cultivation, if he couldn't reach the foundation establishment stage, then he wouldn't escape the cycle of life and death. The middle-aged man seemed to already know of Wang Lin's temper. After he finished kowtowing, he took out a bag of holding and respectfully placed it on the table. Then, he and Shu Tao respectfully left. Wang Lin still hadn't said a single word. It wasn't until after they left that Wang Lin raised his head. He picked up the bag and scanned it with his divine sense to find a large amount of spirit stones inside. He casually threw the bag to the side of the shop, then took a deep breath and walked out of the shop. He sat on a chair outside and looked at the blue sky and white clouds while enjoying the sun. He couldn't help closing his eyes as he really enjoyed this life. If his parents were still alive and they were together in the shop, then he wouldn't have any regrets left in this life. Time quickly went by, and another 5 years passed. On this day, Danyu's father finally couldn't escape the cycle of life and death any longer. The ironworks shop was closed. There were white flags outside the shop, and waves of crying could be heard from inside. Wang Lin stood outside his own shop as he stared at the ironworks shop. He couldn't help but remember the scene from 20 years ago where that hardy young man invited him to their home for dinner. Wang Lin also couldn't forget that because this hardy young man wanted to expand his shop, he came to him and rather awkwardly asked for money to borrow. In these 20-plus years, Wang Lin couldn't even remember how many times he had eaten at their home. But life and death was not something Wang Lin could change. Growing old and dying of old age was part of his comprehension of the heavens. Even if he used some heaven-defying method to extend Danyu's father's life, it would only be a few years before he was eventually taken by the cycle. Not only that, but because of it, his soul would become inferior inside the life and death cycle. After all, Daniu's soul was very different from Wang Zhuo's. Wang Zhuo was a cultivator, which was already a heaven-defying path. This allowed Wang Lin to take his soul and insert it into a pregnant woman. But he couldn't do it for Daniu's father. Wang Lin stood before his own shop and let out a sigh. A flower with black petals suddenly appeared in his hand. This was not a normal flower, but an ingredient for the spirit-expelling pill. If a mortal has just died and their soul hasn't completely dispersed yet, then this flower can cause their soul to become more intact and have more soul power. This allows them a better chance to get a good family inside the Soul River. Wang Lin slowly walked toward the ironwork shop. Inside the shop, various aunts and uncles of Daniu were mourning. A depressing atmosphere filled the shop. Daniu's father lied peacefully inside his coffin in the backyard of the shop. Daniu and his wife were next to the coffin. Daniu's eyes were red. It was obvious that he was just crying. On the side stood another woman. She was Daniu's mother. Her heart was also filled with sadness as she looked at her husband inside the coffin with eyes filled with despair. Wang Lin already realized more than 20 years ago that the relationship between this couple was very deep. The moment Wang Lin entered, everyone revealed a look of respect. In this street, Wang Lin was very well known. After Daniu's mother saw Wang Lin, she gently nodded, knelt down, and whispered, "Widow Xianxia greets Big Brother Wang." Wang Lin let out a sigh and went forward to get her up. Then, he received incense from someone nearby. After he lit it up, he paid his respects. The moment he paid his respects, the sky darkened. However, this kind of darkening was something mortals couldn't see. Black smoke appeared above Daniu's father's body. It gathered until it finally formed the shape of Daniu's father. He hugged his body as if he was very cold, and his face was pale. It was as if he could disappear at any time. He looked around confusedly until his gaze fell on Wang Lin. No one else could see him besides Wang Lin, whose eyes were black and white. He looked straight at him. Wang Lin secretly sighed and crushed the black flower in his hand into black powder. As the powder disappeared, it turned into specks of light invisible to mortals and landed on Daniu's father's body. Daniu's father immediately stopped feeling cold. He gratefully looked at Wang Lin. The current him finally understood that this person who had been his neighbor for more than 20 years was not a mortal. His soul floated in the air. He knelt down and kowtowed a few times toward Wang Lin. Then, he reluctantly looked at his wife and Daniu as his whole body rose into the sky, as if he was climbing a ladder, and soon disappeared. "Dad, Mom, I saw Grandpa." At this moment, a little voice came from the corner. Daniu's son, who was already 9, looked at the sky with a confused expression. However, no one believes the word of a kid. After seeing that no one was listening to him, he wrinkled his nose and stopped talking. Wang Lin regrettably looked at the surroundings. It was not possible to escape from the life and death cycle. He looked at Daniu's father's body as he remembered the past 20 years. A strong young man who aged more and more every year in these past 20 years until he died. He took a deep breath and his gaze fell on Daniu's mother. When he first met her, she was only in her early 30s. She was now over 50 years old. Over 20 years of time were carved on her body. Wang Lin's eyes moved again. This time his gaze fell on Daniu. Daniu was once a clumsy kid that stuck his head into Wang Lin's shop. He was now a grown man. Not only was he married and had a kid, but he was even sending his parents to the grave. Just like a small tree that slowly grows over 20+ years and becomes a powerful tree that can withstand the weather. Thinking of this, Wang Lin's heart suddenly gained a hint of understanding. This feeling of understanding became deeper and deeper. In these 20+ years of turning into a mortal, Wang Lin felt for the first time the gate to comprehending the heavens. He didn't know when he left the ironwork shop. In a state of confusion, he sat before the stove in his shop and stared at the wall. His mind was blank. The only thing remaining was a sliver of divine sense. The interaction Wang Lin had with Daniu's father, Daniu's mother, and Daniu flashed across his mind. The appearance of the three gradually changed throughout these 20+ years. Wang Lin felt an invisible energy surrounding them, causing Daniu's parents to gradually grow old and Daniu to gradually get older. Wang Lin felt something click in his mind. His eyes were emitting an unimaginable light. At this moment, he could feel his body suddenly begin to float. His body slowly floated higher and higher. As he floated into the air, he saw countless mortals, And around these mortals, he saw that mysterious energy again. He could see this energy around flowers and trees. It was around everything. This force came from the heavens, and Wang Lin subconsciously wanted to find the source of this power. Gradually he felt himself floating higher and higher, and the capital city became smaller and smaller. Soon, the city disappeared, and before him was a dirt-brown planet. Unfortunately, even now, he still hadn't found the source of that power. He could feel the power even in the stars. There was no place without it. Wang Lin's personality was very stubborn. If he wasn't stubborn, he wouldn't have spent 400 years just to go back to Zhao to get revenge on the Tang family. Besides stubbornness, he also had determination. He couldn't have gotten from the tiny cultivator he once was to the point he was at now if he wasn't determined. It was exactly this stubbornness and determination that made him want to find the source of this energy. The current him was completely relying on instinct to control his behavior. His body flew higher and higher, but just before he wandered too far from the brown planet, a giant meteor-like rock flew by. On top of this giant rock sat a white-haired old man. When he passed Wang Lin, he exclaimed and revealed a very interested look. I can believe that there is someone who can comprehend so deeply on this waste of a cultivation planet. But with your mere nascent soul cultivation, even if you were using this comprehension to reach the soul formation stage, it is best to not be too greedy. I'm afraid that this kind of heavenly Tao will take you millions of years to find its source. However, when that happens, your body will already have rotted away. Have you considered that? Wang Lin was startled as his eyes filled with confusion. The old man laughed. He carefully looked at Wang Lin and shouted, "My name is Xianxia. Since we've met, I'll make you a deal. If you can get off this waste of a cultivation planet and come find me a planet Tianyun, then I'll let you be an honorary disciple for 100 years. With that, he pointed his right hand, and Wang Lin's body shook. Wang Lin felt as if his body had gotten pushed by a powerful force. He was quickly pushed back down to the dirt-brown planet and back within the Four Alliance area. The capital city turned from a tiny dot to the size of his nails and kept growing larger. He almost immediately returned to his shop inside the capital city. At this moment, Wang Lin suddenly opened his eyes. He was covered in sweat. Along with the sweat, there was also a strong, fishy stench. It had been a very long time since his body released this kind of stench. The last time was when he had reached the foundation establishment stage. At this moment, Wang Lin's eyes lit up. He took a deep breath, picked up a piece of wood, and carefully began to carve. This time, Wang Lin carved for a whole day and night. Finally, when he withdrew this finger, the carving of the cyan-robbed middle-aged man took shape. On the carving, there were hints of passing of time. He quietly looked at the carving. After a long time, he placed it on one of the shelves next to the carvings of the middle-aged man and old woman. After finishing all of that, he got up and went to the backyard. After he washed himself, he changed to clean clothes and returned to the shop. After comprehending the heavens this time, Wang Lin's cultivation level jumped from the mid-stage of nascent soul to the peak of the late stage of nascent soul. He was only a sliver away from the soul formation stage. It was just that when he thought of the scene from earlier, he couldn't help but be scared. If it wasn't for that old man named Tianyunzi pushing him back, he would have really lost himself searching for that source. If that really happened, then the only result was his death. Comprehending the heavens was not a peaceful thing. It was filled with danger. This time, Wang Lin finally understood it. Although he still hadn't reached the soul formation stage, his understanding of the heavens had increased a lot. He believed that he was not far from the soul formation stage. He had now finished carving the statue of the middle-aged man with his domain. It was clear that his domain was imitating the life and death cycle. However, with Wang Lin's current perception, he could easily tell that the middle-aged man's path was only an imitation, far from the real life and death domain. That's because this life and death heavenly Tao was not something soul formation cultivators could comprehend. At this moment, there was a star map inside Wang Lin's mind. This star map was left behind by the old cultivator, Tianyunzi. Inside the map was a planet several times larger than Suzaku. This was the old man Tianyunzi's planet. It was just that it was impossible for the current Wang Lin to go there. He let out a sigh as he adjusted his mood and returned to being a mortal. But in his mind, the feeling of comprehending the Tao of life and death was something he wouldn't forget in his lifetime. Mid-month and the hope for likes on the video has slipped by 2 days already? Tears streaming. Is there any hope left? Chapter 265, Changing Snow. 10 years had passed since he last felt his domain. Wang Lin had lived on this street for more than 30 years. He had turned old. His hair was all white and there were deep wrinkles on his forehead. Danu's mother died from grief 7 years ago. At this point, Danu was managing the ironworks shop himself, and like his father before him, he supported his family, loved his wife, and constantly taught his growing son his trade so that his son may one day take over the shop. This scene was almost exactly the same as when Wang Lin first arrived, only the people had changed. But this scene didn't last long. 3 years ago, Danu's son named Xianxia caught the eyes of a wandering cultivator from the White Cloud sect and was taken back as a disciple. That year, the wandering cultivator also gave him a name, Wenjuo. Danu was very proud that his own son was going to become an immortal. He would tell anyone he could find, and soon everyone on the street knew. Wang Lin wasn't surprised at all about Wenjuo being taken by the wandering cultivator of the White Cloud sect. Wang Lin already noticed that Xianxia had the body to cultivate when he was very little, and his talent was several times better than Wang Lin's when Wang Lin started. Wang Lin did this because the only connection he had in the entire capital was with Danu's family. Therefore, Wang Lin gave Xianxia many pills to alter his body, and this was the effect. As a result, Xianxia's talent became even better, so it was not surprising that he caught the attention of the White Cloud sect cultivator. Although that cultivator was only at core formation stage, after Wang Lin observed him, he found that he was a kind person, very different from Wang Lin's own teacher, Sun Daju. Therefore, Wang Lin didn't interfere and just let it happen naturally. He had already done all he could to help. As for how Wenjuo will be in the future, it was no longer his concern. After Xianxia left, Danu hired a few workers, but in fact this had broken his dad's rule. According to his dad, what they were selling was their skill. If someone else learned that skill, then weren't they picking up a stone to smash their own feet? But it seemed that Danu didn't listen to his dad's words. After he hired the workers, he stopped caring about the shop, and instead returned to his old habits of watching Wang Lin carve every day. With Danu always around to serve Wang Lin, it made Wang Lin recall some old memories. Perhaps it was because Wang Lin watched Danu grow up, but ever since his mother died, he would come over to Wang Lin's place every New Year with his wife and food. Danu seemed to consider Wang Lin his own parent right now. Danu's wife, the tailor shop's shopkeeper's daughter, was a very smart woman. Seeing how her husband looked at Wang Lin, she also gradually began to treat Wang Lin like her own family's elders. As a result, in the final years of Wang Lin's life as a mortal in the capital city, he was able to feel the warmth of a family. This warmth was very strange to Wang Lin, but he didn't reject it. Shu Tao had also changed from a middle-aged man to an old man with some white in his hair. His current position had shot up from 10 years ago. He was now the chancellor for the king. This was not the king from back then, but the prince. After the prince became the king, his tributes didn't decrease. They only increased. Every year he would personally come and kowtow toward Wang Lin, completely disregarding his position. Over these years, Wang Lin began to really admire the prince. After all, he was a king in the mortal world. To be able to lower his head like that takes a lot of determination. Perhaps it was because he had experienced a lot and realized that there were people that could kill him with just their finger, and no one would care. One of the reasons he was so respectful to Wang Lin was to pull Wang Lin to his side so he could have a peaceful life. In this winter, it snowed heavily. In the 30-plus years Wang Lin had been here, he had never seen it snow this hard before. The snow covered the entire capital. The snow on rooftops and trees were as tall as a 4 or 5-year-old child. A lot of roofs collapsed under the pressure of all this snow. Some of the weaker people had frozen to death. Almost every morning, people would find 1 or 2 frozen bodies on the corners of the streets. This snow was very strange. Some of the people that had lived here for generations gathered in restaurants and talked about how there hadn't been snow this heavy for hundreds of years. The snow continued to fall and slowly covered the footprints made by the people that walked around. Soon, the footprint would be completely covered and be unnoticeable. This forced a lot of shops in the capital city to close down. The street Wang Lin was at was relatively remote, so after one day of snow, it was impossible to see anyone outside anymore. All of the people were hiding at home, sitting in front of their stoves to keep themselves warm as they waited for the snow to pass. This snow was indeed very strange. From the moment the snow began to fall, Wang Lin immediately noticed that in the snow there was a trace of killing intent. This killing intent was very faint, but it has to be said that this snow covered the entire four-sect alliance, so this killing intent was almost monstrous. The reason the temperature dropped so fast was due to this killing intent. This snow didn't come from the clouds, but appeared out of the thin air in the sky. How else could there be clouds big enough to cover the entire four-sect alliance? On the third day of this strange snow, the 9 pillars in the capital were split in half by lightning from the sky. The cultivators inside didn't even have time to escape, as they were killed by the lightning. The moment this occurred, every single pillar like this in the other cities in the entire four-sect alliance were destroyed by lightning from the sky. Shortly after, in addition to the snow falling from the sky, countless pieces of jade flew out from the east, south, west, and north corners of the country. Although these pieces of jade were very fast, the moment they met a foundation establishment cultivator, they would fall into their hands. One of those pieces of jade flew back to Wang Lin. After he waved his hand, even though it had already gone past him, it still flew directly into his hand. Wang Lin held the piece of jade in his hand and scanned it only to hear a gloomy voice say, "All cultivators inside the four-sect alliance prepare for war." The 4 sects, Water Ink sect, White Cloud sect, Green Wood sect, and Black Soul sect, are calling